The rejection ceremony was supposed to be sacred. Instead, it became a massacre of dignity. Lyra Vance stood at the stone altar, her wrists bound with ceremonial rope, while Caden Thorne, future Alpha, her fated mate, spat at her feet. "I reject you," he said loud enough for the entire Blackridge pack to hear. "Your cursed blood will never poison my line." 300 wolves watched. None spoke in her defense. What they didn't know, she was already carrying his child. And what he didn't know, rejection wouldn't kill her. It would remake her into something far more dangerous. Stay until the end to see how the outcast becomes the queen. Like this video, and comment which city you're watching from. The Blackridge territory smelled like wet stone and old violence. Lyra had grown up breathing it, learning early that survival here meant making yourself small, invisible, useful. She'd spent 19 years perfecting the art of disappearing. But tonight, there would be no hiding. The Harvest Moon ceremony was the pack's most sacred ritual, a night when bonds were declared, mates were chosen, and the future of the bloodline was sealed under the witness of the ancestors. Lyra had been summoned to the central gathering grounds, dragged from her healer's hut by 2 enforcers who didn't bother to explain why. She already knew. Caden Thorne, heir to the Blackridge pack, had been circling her for months. Not out of affection, never that. Out of obligation. A cruel trick of biology had linked their scents, marking them as potential mates in the eyes of the pack's ancient laws. But Caden had made his feelings clear from the beginning. "You think I'd willingly tie myself to Vance filth?" he'd sneered 3 weeks ago, cornering her near the river. "Your bloodline is a stain. Everyone knows what your mother did." Lyra hadn't responded. There was no point. Her mother, Alara Vance, had died during a healing ritual gone wrong, accused of dark magic, condemned by the elders, executed before Lyra's 8th birthday. The pack had never forgiven the family name, and Lyra, marked by association, had spent her life atoning for sins she didn't commit. Now standing in the center of the ceremonial circle with torches blazing around her and 300 wolves forming a living wall of judgment, she felt the weight of that name crushing down. Caden stood across from her, dressed in the formal leathers of an alpha heir, dark, sharp, designed to intimidate. His jaw was set, his eyes cold. Beside him stood his father, Alpha Garrick Thorne, a man whose cruelty was legend even in a pack that prided itself on ruthlessness. "Lyra Vance," Garrick began, his voice echoing across the clearing, "you stand accused of attempting to corrupt the bloodline of Blackridge through false bond manipulation." Lyra's breath caught. "That's not—" Silence. Garrick's roar silenced even the crickets. "You will speak only when commanded." The enforcers tightened their grip on her arms. She could feel the eyes of the pack on her, hungry, eager for violence. This wasn't a trial. It was a spectacle. Caden stepped forward, his expression twisted with disgust. "I was told by the healers that our scents aligned, that the ancestors marked us as compatible." He spat the word like poison. "But I know the truth. Your kind used tricks, potions, blood rituals. You tried to force a bond that was never meant to be." "I never—" Lyra's voice cracked. "I never used anything. I didn't ask for this." "Liar." Caden's voice was flat, final. He turned to face the crowd. "I, Caden Thorne, future Alpha of the Blackridge pack, publicly reject Lyra Vance as my mate. I sever any bond, real or imagined, and cast her from consideration in this pack's future." The words hit like a physical blow. Lyra's knees buckled, but the enforcers held her upright. Around her, the pack began to murmur, some in approval, others in shock. Rejection wasn't common. It was considered dangerous, unstable, capable of breaking a wolf's spirit entirely. But Caden wasn't finished. He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "You want to know the real reason I reject you?" His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her ears. "Because I already know what you're hiding." Lyra's blood turned to ice. "You're pregnant," Caden hissed. "I can smell it on you. And that thing growing inside you? It's an abomination, just like you." Her mind went blank. She'd suspected for weeks, missed cycles, strange cravings, the exhaustion that clung to her bones. But she'd pushed it aside, refused to believe it. Now, hearing him say it out loud, the truth crashed down with horrifying clarity. Caden pulled back, addressing the crowd again. "This woman carries corrupted blood. If she's allowed to live, she'll spread her poison through our territory. I call for exile. No, for execution. The crowd erupted. Exile. Kill her. Burn the cursed line. Lyra's legs finally gave out. She collapsed to her knees, the rough stones scraping her skin. The enforcers released her, stepping back as if proximity alone might infect them. Alpha Garrick raised a hand, and the noise died. The law is clear, he said. A rejected wolf has 3 days to leave the territory. If she returns, she will be hunted and killed. 3 days isn't enough, Caden snarled. She's carrying... Enough. Garrick's tone allowed no argument. The law stands. Lyra Vance, you are exiled from Blackridge. You have until the 3rd dawn to cross the border. If you are seen here after that, your life is forfeit. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. And if anyone aids her, food, shelter, or passage, they will share her fate. The pack fell silent. Lyra forced herself to stand, every muscle screaming in protest. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But as she turned to leave, Caden's voice cut through the night one last time. Run fast, Vance, because when those 3 days are up, I'm coming for you myself. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lyra didn't respond. She simply walked, one foot in front of the other, past the circle of wolves who parted for her like she was diseased. Some spat as she passed. Others muttered curses under their breath. A few, very few, looked away, shame flickering across their faces before vanishing. None helped. By the time she reached the edge of the gathering grounds, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the edges of her cloak. Behind her, the ceremony continued. Music started up again, drums and flutes, the traditional songs of bonding and celebration. They were already moving on, erasing her from their collective memory. She'd been discarded, thrown away like spoiled meat, and she was going to die out there. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But what choice did she have? The first night, Lyra didn't run. She walked. She gathered what little she had, a worn leather satchel, a few herbs from her healer's hut, a dull skinning knife, and a frayed woolen cloak that had belonged to her mother. The pack had already stripped her of everything else. Her hut, her supplies, her position as the pack's lowest-ranked healer, all of it gone in the span of a rejection ceremony. The hut had been ransacked, shelves overturned, jars smashed, years of carefully cultivated herbs trampled into the dirt floor. Someone had scrawled "cursed" across the wall in what looked like animal blood. Lyra stared at it for a long moment, her chest tight. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door behind her for the last time. By the time the moon reached its peak, she was at the edge of Blackridge territory, standing at the border marked by ancient stone pillars. Beyond them lay the Wither Reach, a stretch of wilderness so brutal that even seasoned hunters avoided it. No pack claimed it. No wolves lived there. It was where wolves went to die. Lyra crossed the border without looking back. The Wither Reach earned its name. The trees here were gnarled and skeletal, their branches clawing at the sky like the fingers of the dead. The ground was uneven, riddled with hidden roots and sharp stones that tore at her boots. And the silence was worse than the howls of the pack. It pressed down on her, suffocating, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the distant shriek of a predator. She walked until her legs gave out, then collapsed against the base of a massive oak tree. Her body ached. Her mind screamed. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she placed a trembling hand over her stomach. There's something alive in there. Something that's part of me. Part of him. The rage came then, sudden and vicious. Caden had known. He'd smelled it on her, recognized the shift in her scent, and instead of acknowledging it, instead of doing the decent thing, he'd humiliated her, cast her out, sentenced her to death. Bastard, she whispered into the darkness. Coward, but anger wouldn't keep her alive. She forced herself to focus, to take inventory. She had maybe 2 days' worth of dried meat, a water skin that was already half empty, and no real plan beyond don't die. She couldn't go back. She couldn't beg another pack for sanctuary. No one would take in a rejected wolf, especially not one carrying a child. The only option was forward. Survive. Just survive. She pulled the cloak tighter around herself and closed her eyes. Sleep came in fits and starts. interrupted by strange sounds and the gnawing certainty that something was watching her from the darkness. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray through the canopy, Lyra forced herself to her feet. Her muscles had stiffened overnight, and every movement sent fresh waves of pain through her body. But pain meant she was still alive. She had to keep moving. The second day was worse. The terrain grew steeper, rockier, harder to navigate. Her boots, already worn thin from years of use, were falling apart, the soles flapping with every step. She'd wrapped them in strips of cloth torn from her undershirt, but it didn't help much. By midday, she found water. A thin stream cut through the wither reach, barely more than a trickle, but it was clean. Lyra drank until her stomach ached, then refilled her water skin. She sat on a flat rock beside the stream, her feet dangling in the cold water, and allowed herself a moment to rest. That's when she saw the tracks, fresh prints in the mud along the bank. Wolf prints, large ones. Lyra's heart began to pound. She scanned the tree line, searching for movement, but saw nothing. Still, the tracks were recent, maybe an hour old, and they were headed in the same direction she was. She forced herself to stand, ignoring the protest from her aching feet, and kept moving. But now every shadow seemed threatening, every rustle of leaves made her jump. By evening, her right boot had completely given up, the sole detached entirely, flapping uselessly with each step until she finally tore it off and threw it aside. Walking barefoot was agony. The ground was littered with sharp stones and thorns. But she had no choice. That night, she made camp in the hollow of a fallen tree, using her cloak as a blanket and her satchel as a pillow. She didn't dare light a fire. Fire meant smoke, and smoke meant attention. She chewed on a strip of dried meat and tried not to think about how little food she had left. Maybe another day's worth if she rationed carefully. After that, she'd have to hunt, or forage, or starve. One problem at a time. She was drifting off to sleep when she heard it. A howl, distant but unmistakable. Her eyes snapped open. Another howl answered the first, closer this time. Then a third, off to her left. They were triangulating her position. Lyra scrambled out of the hollow, her hands shaking as she stuffed her belongings back into the satchel. She didn't need to wonder who was out there. She already knew. Caden hadn't waited 3 days. He'd sent hunters after her. Or maybe he'd come himself. She forced herself to move, ignoring the pain in her feet, the exhaustion dragging at her limbs. The trees thickened here, offering some cover, but not enough, not nearly enough. The howls split into different directions. They were spreading out, cutting off escape routes. They're not just hunting, they're hurting. Panic clawed at her throat. She wasn't a fighter. She'd never been trained in combat. Her only weapon was a dull knife that could barely cut through leather, let alone defend against trained enforcers. And she was pregnant, slow, vulnerable, prey. The first enforcer appeared to her left, a massive gray wolf with scars crisscrossing his muzzle. She recognized him. Brock, one of Caden's most loyal followers. He'd never liked her, even before the rejection. He didn't attack. He just watched, his yellow eyes gleaming in the moonlight, his lips pulling back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. The second enforcer came from her right, smaller, leaner, but faster. A female named Senna. She'd been one of the wolves who spat at Lyra during the ceremony. And then, from directly ahead, Caden stepped into view. He was still in human form, dressed in hunting leathers, a curved blade strapped to his hip. His expression was calm, almost bored, like this was just another routine task. "You made it farther than I expected," he said, his voice carrying easily through the quiet forest. "I'm almost impressed." Lyra's hand went to the knife at her belt. It felt pathetically small in her grip. "You're not allowed to cross the border," she said, hating how her voice shook. "The exile law—" "The exile law," Caden interrupted, taking a step closer, "doesn't apply to executions." He drew his blade slowly, letting the steel catch the moonlight. "You're carrying corrupted blood, Vance. That makes you a threat to the pack, and threats get eliminated." "I'm no threat to anyone." "You're right." Caden smiled, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. "You won't be. Not after tonight." Brock and Senna began to close in, moving in perfect coordination. They'd done this before, hunted together, killed together. Lyra's mind raced. She couldn't fight them, couldn't outrun them. But maybe... She bolted. Not forward, where Caden stood blocking her path, but to the side, diving between two close-set trees that the larger wolves would have trouble navigating. Behind her, she heard snarls and the thunder of paws hitting the ground. "Don't let her reach the ravine!" Caden's voice, sharp with command. Lyra didn't know what ravine he was talking about, but she ran toward it anyway. Anything was better than staying here. The forest blurred around her. Branches whipped at her face, tore at her clothes. Her bare feet slipped on wet leaves, and she went down hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. She rolled, gasping, just in time to see Brock lunging for her throat. Instinct took over. She raised the knife, and the blade sank into the soft flesh of his shoulder. It wasn't deep. Her arm didn't have the strength for that, but it was enough to make him yelp and stumble sideways. Senna came at her from the other side, teeth snapping. Lyra kicked out blindly, her foot connecting with the wolf's ribs. Senna snarled, circling back for another attack. Lyra scrambled to her feet, but her ankle gave out. She'd twisted it in the fall. Pain shot up her leg, white-hot and blinding. No, not now. Brock was recovering, shaking his head, blood dripping from his shoulder. His eyes had gone feral, angry. Senna crouched, preparing to spring. Caden walked forward slowly, almost leisurely, like he had all the time in the world. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said conversationally. "I actually felt sorry for you once, back when we were kids. You were always so pathetic, always trying so hard to belong." He crouched down so he was eye level with her. "But then you had to go and ruin it. You had to get pregnant, force my hand." "I didn't force anything," Lyra spat, her voice raw. "You're the one who what? Made a mistake?" Caden laughed, bitter and sharp. "Yeah, I did. And now I'm fixing it." He stood, raising his blade. "Any last words?" Lyra's hand tightened on her knife. Her other hand pressed against her stomach, feeling the barely there curve of new life. "I'm sorry," she thought. "I tried." And then, suddenly, the forest exploded with noise. A roar, not a howl, but a roar, shook the trees. Brock and Senna scattered, their ears flattening, tails tucking. Even Caden stepped back, his blade lowering slightly as his head snapped toward the source of the sound. From the shadows, a wolf emerged. He was enormous, easily twice the size of any wolf Lyra had ever seen, his fur a deep midnight black that seemed to swallow the moonlight. His eyes were pale gold, sharp and calculating, and when he stepped forward, the ground seemed to tremble beneath his massive paws. Alpha energy radiated off him in waves so intense that Lyra felt it pressing against her chest like a physical weight. Brock and Senna immediately dropped into submissive postures, bellies low to the ground, heads down. Caden, to his credit, held his ground, but his knuckles were white around the hilt of his blade. "Core," he said, and the name came out tight, strained. The black wolf shifted. The transformation was fluid, seamless. One moment a beast, the next a man. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a build that spoke of brutal strength. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His hair was dark, pushed back from his face, and his eyes were the same pale gold as his wolf form. He was bare-chested, wearing only dark pants that sat low on his hips, and his skin was marked with scars. Old ones. Battle ones. This was Draven Core, the Alpha King of the Northern Reach. Lyra had heard stories about him. Everyone had. He ruled the largest, most feared pack in the territories, and his reputation for brutality was matched only by his reputation for fairness. Cross him, and you died. Honor your word, and he'd defend you to the death. He was a legend, and he was standing 10 feet away from her, staring at Caden with an expression that could freeze blood. "You're in neutral territory, Thorn," Draven said, his voice low and rough. "That's a violation of the Accord." "She's Blackridge business," Caden snapped, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "This doesn't concern you. You're hunting a pregnant woman in the Wither Reach." Draven's gaze flicked to Lyra, who was still on the ground, bleeding and trembling. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That makes it my concern." "She's corrupted," Caden insisted. "Dangerous. Her bloodline," Draven interrupted, "is none of your concern anymore. You rejected her. That means she's no longer bound to Blackridge law." He took a step forward, and Caden actually flinched. Which means you have no authority here. I have the right to protect my pack. From a half-starved healer with a twisted ankle? Draven's tone was mocking now. Tell me, Thorn, does that make you feel strong, hunting down a woman who can barely walk? Caden's jaw clenched. This isn't over, Core. No, Draven agreed, his voice dropping to something dark and dangerous. It's not, but it's over for tonight. For a long moment, no one moved. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then, slowly, Caden sheathed his blade. We'll be back. I'm counting on it. Caden's eyes flicked to Lyra one last time, filled with something that might have been regret. Or hatred. She couldn't tell. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. Brock and Senna followed, their heads still low, their movements quick and submissive. Silence fell. Lyra sat frozen, her back against a tree, her knife still clutched in her shaking hand. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Draven Core was still standing there, watching her with those unsettling gold eyes. You're bleeding, he said finally. I'm fine, Lyra lied. Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible. You're not. He crouched down, moving slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. Let me see. Don't. She flinched back. He paused. I'm not going to hurt you. Everyone says that. Fair enough. He stayed where he was, not moving closer. But you've got about 10 minutes before you pass out from blood loss and shock. So you can either let me help or you can lie here and bleed out. Your choice. Lyra looked down. Her leg was worse than she'd thought. The gash from Senna's teeth was deep, tearing through muscle. Blood was pooling beneath her, soaking into the dirt. He was right. She was going to pass out. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why did you help me? Draven's expression didn't change. Because I know what it's like to be hunted. He held out his hand. Lyra stared at it, large, scarred, steady. She didn't trust him, didn't trust anyone, but she was out of options. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. His grip was firm but careful, and he pulled her to her feet, well, foot. Her ankle refused to bear weight. Can you walk? He asked. No. Then I'll carry you. Before she could protest, he bent and scooped her up, one arm under her knees, the other supporting her back. She weighed nothing to him. Where are you taking me? She asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Somewhere safe. There's no such thing. Draven glanced down at her, and for the first time, something almost like sympathy flickered across his face. No, he agreed quietly. There's not, but it's better than here. And with that, he turned and walked into the forest, carrying her into the unknown. Draven's territory was nothing like Blackridge, where her old pack had built their stronghold in open clearings with rough-hewn cabins clustered together like frightened animals. The northern reach was carved into the mountainside itself. Stone structures rose from the rock face, blending so seamlessly with the natural landscape that Lyra didn't realize they were man-made until they were almost upon them. The main compound was a fortress. Thick walls, narrow windows, defensible positions at every turn. This was a pack built for war. Draven carried her through a side entrance, avoiding the main gates where she could hear voices and movement. He moved quickly, silently, and didn't speak until they were inside a small stone room lit by a single oil lamp. He set her down on a narrow cot, then stepped back, putting distance between them. Stay here, he said. Don't leave this room. Don't talk to anyone. If someone comes to the door, don't answer. Why are you helping me? The question came out before she could stop it. Draven paused at the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I've seen what happens when packs turn on their own. It never ends well. He left before she could respond. Lyra sat in the silence, her hands trembling in her lap. The room was sparse, just the cot, a small wooden table, and a basin of water. But it was warm, dry, safe. For now. She looked down at her leg. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. The gash was deep, ragged, already starting to swell. She needed to clean it, stitch it, or risk infection. She dragged herself to the basin, tore strips from the hem of her already ruined dress, and began the painful process of cleaning the wound. Every touch sent fire up her leg, but she forced herself to keep going. She'd stitched up other wolves countless times. Now she'd have to do it to herself. Her hands shook as she threaded the needle she'd salvaged from her satchel. The first stitch went in crooked. The second wasn't much better. By the fifth, she was biting down on a strip of leather to keep from screaming. When it was done, she collapsed back onto the cot, drenched in sweat, her vision swimming. I'm alive, she thought. For now, that's enough. She didn't remember falling asleep. When she woke, someone was in the room. Lyra jerked upright, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife at her belt, except it wasn't there. She'd dropped it in the forest. Easy. The voice was female, calm. I'm not here to hurt you. A woman stood near the table, holding a tray with food and fresh bandages. She was older than Lyra, maybe in her mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a braid and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. My name's Mira, the woman said. I'm the head healer here. Draven asked me to check on you. Lyra's body remained tense. I don't need help. Mira raised an eyebrow, glancing pointedly at Lyra's bandaged leg. Your stitching says otherwise. You did a decent job, considering, but you missed a bleeder. You'll be lucky if that doesn't get infected. I'll manage. Sure you will. Mira set the tray down and crossed her arms. Look, I don't care what your story is. I don't care where you came from or why Draven dragged you in here in the middle of the night. But I do care about keeping people alive. So you can either let me help, or you can sit there bleeding until you pass out again. Your choice. It was the same thing Draven had said. Your choice. Except it wasn't really a choice, was it? She was trapped here. Injured, pregnant, alone. She had no leverage, no power, no options. Lyra's shoulders sagged. Fine. Mira worked quickly and efficiently, re-cleaning the wound and adding 2 more stitches that Lyra had missed. Her touch was firm, but not cruel, and she didn't ask questions. When she was done, she handed Lyra a wooden bowl filled with thick stew and a chunk of dark bread. Eat, Mira said. You're malnourished. That's not good for you or the pup. Lyra froze, the bowl halfway to her lips. How did you... I'm a healer. It's my job to notice. Mira's expression softened slightly. How far along are you? I don't know. Maybe 2 months? You need to eat more, rest more. You're running yourself into the ground. I didn't exactly have a choice, Lyra snapped. No, Mira agreed quietly. I don't suppose you did. She stood, gathering her supplies. Draven wants to see you when you're strong enough to walk. Don't rush it. He'll wait. Why is he doing this? Lyra asked. Helping me. He doesn't even know me. Mira paused at the door, her expression unreadable. Draven doesn't do anything without a reason. But whatever his reason is, it's his to share, not mine. And then she was gone. 3 days passed before Lyra could walk without collapsing. During that time, she saw no one except Mira, who came twice daily to change her bandages and force food down her throat. The room remained locked from the outside. Not a cell, exactly, but not freedom either. She was a prisoner, a guest, something in between. On the 4th day, the door opened, and Draven stepped inside. He looked different in the daylight, less monstrous, more human. He'd shaved the stubble from his jaw and tied his dark hair back, though it didn't do much to soften the hard lines of his face. He wore simple clothing, a dark shirt, worn pants, boots, but he still radiated that overwhelming alpha presence. Lyra stood, leaning heavily on the table for support. You wanted to see me. You're healing. It wasn't a question. Thanks to your healer. Mira's good at what she does. He moved further into the room, but kept his distance. How are you feeling? Like I got mauled by wolves and left for dead. The sarcasm came out sharper than she'd intended. Draven's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Fair. Silence stretched between them. Lyra broke it first. Why did you save me? I told you No, you gave me a line. I know what it's like to be hunted. That's not an answer. Draven's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd leave without answering. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. 20 years ago, my father was Alpha King of the Northern Reach. He was a good leader, fair, strong. But he made enemies. One of them orchestrated a coup, framed him for treason, turned half the pack against him. My mother and sister were killed in the attack. My father was executed. Lyra's breath caught. I was 14, Draven continued, his voice flat. I survived because I ran. Spent 2 years in the wild, hunted by the wolves who'd taken over my father's territory. When I finally came back, I challenged the false alpha and killed him, took back what was mine. He met her eyes, and she saw something cold and ancient there. So yeah, I know what it's like to be hunted, to have your own people turn on you for something you didn't do. I'm sorry, Lyra whispered. Don't be. It made me stronger. He paused. The question is, will it make you stronger? I don't understand. You have 3 options, Draven said. 1, you can leave. I'll give you supplies, point you toward neutral territory, and you're on your own. 2, you can stay here as a refugee. You'll be fed, sheltered, protected. But you'll have no rank, no voice, no power. You'll exist at my mercy. And the 3rd option? You stay and earn your place. You work. You contribute. You prove you're more than just a victim. Lyra laughed, bitter and sharp. I'm pregnant, injured, and hated by the only pack I've ever known. What exactly do you think I can contribute? You're a healer. A cursed healer. No one will let me touch them. My wolves will. Draven's tone left no room for argument. If I say you're trustworthy, they'll listen, but you have to prove me right. One mistake, and you're out. Understood? It wasn't a generous offer. It was a test, but it was more than anyone else had given her. Fine, Lyra said. I'll stay. I'll work. Good. Draven turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Caden Thorne violated the accord by hunting you in neutral territory. That gives me leverage. If he comes after you again, he's not just fighting you, he's fighting me. He'll come, Lyra said quietly. He won't stop until I'm dead. Then he'll die trying. The certainty in his voice sent a chill down her spine. Earning her place was harder than she'd expected. The Northern Reach wolves didn't trust her. They tolerated her because Draven commanded it, but their eyes followed her everywhere, cold and suspicious. When she walked through the compound, conversations stopped. When she entered the healer's den to assist Mira, wolves would request different hands. Give it time, Mira said one afternoon as they ground herbs together. They'll come around. Will they? Lyra asked. Depends. Can you handle the work? The work was brutal. The Northern Reach was constantly in conflict. Border skirmishes, rogue attacks, challenges from rival packs. Injured wolves came through the healer's den daily. Mira expected Lyra to keep up, pregnancy be damned. She stitched wounds, set bones, mixed poultices for infections and fevers. She worked until her hands cramped and her back ached and she could barely stand. And slowly, very slowly, the wolves began to notice. You're good at this, one young fighter said grudgingly as Lyra wrapped his dislocated shoulder. Better than I expected. Thanks, Lyra said dryly. That's almost a compliment. He grinned. Don't let it go to your head, Vance. But word spread. The outcast can heal. She's not useless. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. 2 months into her stay, everything changed. Lyra was in the healer's den, organizing supplies, when she heard the alarm horns. 3 sharp blasts, the signal for an external threat. Mira's head snapped up. Raiders. What do we do? We get ready for casualties. Mira was already moving, pulling out field kits and laying them on the table. They'll bring the wounded here. Be ready. The first wave arrived within minutes. 5 wolves, bloodied and snarling, carried in by their packmates. Mira took the worst cases, barking orders at Lyra to handle the others. Lyra worked on autopilot, cleaning wounds, stitching gashes, setting a broken arm. The den filled with the smell of blood and sweat and fear. Then the doors burst open, and 2 wolves dragged in a massive fighter with a gaping wound across his chest. He was barely conscious, his breathing ragged. Lyra! Mira shouted. I need you here, now! Lyra ran over, her hands already reaching for bandages, but when she saw the wound, her stomach dropped. It was deep, arterial. He was bleeding out. We need to cauterize it, Mira said. Fast, hold him down. Lyra pressed her weight against the fighter's shoulders while Mira heated a blade in the fire. The man thrashed weakly, his eyes rolling back. Hold him! Mira pressed the glowing blade to the wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the room. The fighter screamed, a sound so raw and animal that it made Lyra's skin crawl. But it worked. The bleeding stopped. Mira stepped back, sweat dripping down her face. Good. Now stitch him up while I handle the next one. Lyra's hands shook as she threaded the needle. She'd never dealt with an injury this severe, but she forced herself to focus, to push past the fear, and she stitched. By the time the battle was over, 7 wolves had come through the den. 6 survived, 1 didn't. Lyra stood over the body, a young male, maybe 20, and felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd tried, Mira had tried, but the wound had been too deep, the blood loss too severe. "You can't save everyone," Mira said quietly, appearing at her side. "I should have worked faster." "You did everything right. Sometimes it's not enough." Mira squeezed her shoulder. "Remember his face. Let it drive you to be better, but don't let it break you." Lyra nodded, but the cold weight remained. That night, Draven found her sitting on the steps outside the healer's den, staring at the stars. "You did well today," he said, sitting down beside her. "I lost someone." "I know. I lost 3. Lyra looked at him. "How do you do it? Send people to die and just keep going?" "Because if I stop, more people die." His voice was quiet, rough. "Every decision I make costs something. I just have to make sure it's worth the price." "And is it? Worth it?" Draven was silent for a long moment. Then, "Ask me again in 10 years. They sat in silence, watching the stars. And for the first time since her exile, Lyra felt something other than fear or anger. She felt almost at peace. The peace shattered 2 weeks later. Lyra was 7 months pregnant now, her belly round and heavy. Mira had restricted her to light duties, mixing medicines, organizing supplies, teaching younger healers. No more heavy lifting, no more battlefield work. She'd just finished cataloging a shipment of herbs when she heard shouting from the courtyard, then screaming. She rushed to the window and saw chaos. Wolves running, steel flashing, blood, raiders, again. But something felt wrong. This wasn't a skirmish. This was an invasion. The doors to the healer's den burst open. Draven strode in, his face grim, blood splattered across his chest. "We're evacuating the non-combatants," he said. "You need to go. Now." "What's happening?" "Caden Thorne brought his entire pack. This isn't a raid, it's a war." Lyra's blood turned to ice. "He's here for me." "Yes." Draven's expression was hard. "Which is why you're leaving. Mira will take you to the southern tunnels. There's a safe house 3 miles out. You'll wait there until this is over." "No. This isn't a debate. He's here because of me." Lyra's voice cracked. "If I leave, he'll destroy everything, your pack, your people, all because you helped me. And if you stay, he'll kill you." "Maybe." She met his eyes. "Or maybe I can end this." "How?" "Let me talk to him. Let me offer him what he wants." "You?" Draven's voice was flat. "He wants you dead." "He wants the child dead," Lyra corrected. "If I offer him that, if I tell him I'll leave, that I'll make sure the bloodline ends, maybe he'll stop." "You'd sacrifice your child?" "I'd lie." Her voice was cold. "I'd say anything to get him to call off his wolves, and then when he's close enough, I'd kill him myself." Draven stared at her, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "You can't fight. You're 7 months pregnant." "I don't need to fight. I need one opening, one moment." She pulled a small vial from her pocket. Concentrated nightshade, something she'd been preparing for emergencies. "This works fast. He won't see it coming. This is insane. This is the only way." Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. Draven's jaw clenched. "If you do this, you'll be putting yourself in the middle of a war zone. I can't protect you." "I'm not asking you to." Lyra's hand went to her belly. "But I'm asking you to protect this child if I fail. Promise me. Please." Draven looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. "I promise." "Then let's end this." They found Caden in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by his enforcers. He was covered in blood, some his, most not. When he saw Lyra, his eyes went wide with recognition. Then fury. There she is, he roared. The cursed bitch who started all this. Draven stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. Stand down, Thorn. This doesn't have to end in more bloodshed. It ends when she's dead, Caden spat. She and that abomination she's carrying. I'll go, Lyra said, her voice loud enough to carry. I'll leave the Northern Reach. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. Caden laughed. You think I'm stupid? You'll run, hide, and raise that thing to come after me one day. No, this ends tonight. Then let's end it, Lyra said. She stepped forward, away from Draven, her hands raised. No weapons, no tricks, just you and me. You can't fight me. I know. She took another step. But I can offer you something better, the truth. Caden's eyes narrowed. What truth? About my bloodline. About what your father's been hiding. That got his attention. He signaled his wolves to hold, then approached slowly, suspicion written across his face. Talk. Lyra's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the vial. My mother wasn't cursed. She was murdered. By your father. Because she discovered something he didn't want anyone to know. You're lying. Am I? She was close now. 5 feet, 4. Ask yourself why he was so eager to have me killed. Why he pushed for my execution instead of exile. What's he afraid of? Caden's expression flickered. Doubt, anger, confusion. You want the truth? Lyra whispered. It's in your father's private study. Hidden documents. Proof of what he did. What did he do? He stole the alpha position. Your bloodline isn't legitimate. Caden's face went white. That's... Lyra struck. She pulled the vial, unstoppered it, and threw the liquid directly into his face. Nightshade concentrate, lethal on contact with the eyes and mouth. Caden screamed, his hands clawing at his face. His enforcers surged forward, but Draven's wolves were faster, forming a wall between Lyra and the Blackridge pack. Get her out of here, Draven roared. But Lyra didn't run. She stood frozen, watching as Caden collapsed, convulsing, foam bubbling from his lips. It took less than 30 seconds. Then he was still. The courtyard fell silent. Lyra's legs gave out. She hit the ground hard, her vision swimming, her breath coming in short gasps. It's over. He's dead. It's finally over. But then one of Caden's enforcers, Brock, the scarred gray wolf, shifted into human form and pointed directly at her. She murdered him, he screamed. The Alpha's heir. She's a kinslayer. The Blackridge wolves erupted in rage, surging forward despite Draven's warriors trying to hold them back. And in the chaos, Lyra felt something wet and warm spreading down her legs. She looked down. Blood. No, she whispered. No, not now, please, not now. But her body didn't listen. Pain tore through her abdomen, sharp and vicious, and she doubled over with a scream. Mira appeared at her side from nowhere, her face pale. She's going into labor. We need to move her, now. Draven scooped Lyra up as easily as he had that first night and ran. Behind them, the compound descended into chaos, snarls and screams, and the wet sound of steel meeting flesh. But Draven didn't slow. He carried Lyra through corridors she'd never seen, down spiral staircases cut into the mountain itself, deeper and deeper until the sounds of battle faded to distant echoes. Hold on, he said, his voice tight. Just hold on. Lyra couldn't answer. Another contraction tore through her, and she bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood. It was too early. 7 months. The baby wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. Please. Not like this. They burst into a chamber carved from natural stone, lit by dozens of oil lamps. Mira was already there, along with 2 younger healers Lyra recognized from the den. They'd prepared. Blankets, water, instruments laid out on a stone table. Put her here. Mira gestured to a raised platform covered in clean cloth. Draven set her down carefully, but Lyra's fingers clenched around his arm, refusing to let go. Don't leave, she gasped. I have to get back. Please, her voice broke. If I die, if something goes wrong, someone needs to be here. For the baby. You promised. His jaw tightened. Then he nodded and stepped back, positioning himself near the entrance where he could watch both the corridor and the chamber. Mira moved to Lyra's side, her hands already assessing, pressing gently against her swollen belly. How long between contractions? I don't know, 2 minutes? Maybe less. And the bleeding? It hasn't stopped. Mira's expression went carefully blank, which was somehow worse than panic. All right, we're going to get through this, but I need you to focus. Can you do that? Lyra nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Good. Now breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. The next contraction hit like a hammer. Lyra screamed, her back arching, her nails digging into the cloth beneath her. That's it, Mira said, her voice steady. Let it come. Don't fight it. Don't fight it. Easy for her to say. Every instinct Lyra had screamed to fight, to resist, to make it stop. But there was no stopping this. Hours blurred together, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning, replaced by waves of agony that crashed over her again and again. She heard herself making sounds she didn't recognize, animal sounds, desperate and raw. Somewhere above them, the battle raged on. She could feel it through the stone. Vibrations, tremors, the occasional boom that made the oil lamps flicker. How many had died already? How many more would die before this ended? I can see the head, one of the younger healers said, her voice shaking slightly. Good. Lyra, on the next contraction, I need you to push. Everything you have. Understand? Lyra managed a nod. Sweat dripped into her eyes, blurring her vision. Her whole body felt like it was being torn in half. The contraction came and she bore down with every ounce of strength left in her body. Something tore. She felt it. A sharp, wet, ripping sensation deep inside. Screamed until her throat went raw. Again, push! She pushed, and again. Her vision tunneled. The edges went dark. She could hear Mira shouting something, but the words didn't make sense anymore. Everything was pain and pressure and the overwhelming certainty that she was dying. This is it. This is how it ends. And then suddenly, there was a different sound. High-pitched, furious, alive. A baby's cry. It's a boy, Mira said, her voice thick with something that might have been relief. You have a son. Lyra's vision swam back into focus. Is he? He's small, too small, but he's breathing. He's alive. They placed him on her chest, and Lyra looked down at the tiny, wrinkled creature that had been growing inside her for 7 months. He was so small he fit in her 2 hands. His skin was mottled red and purple, and his eyes were squeezed shut against the sudden brightness of the world. His fingers, impossibly small fingers, clenched and unclenched. But he was hers. Kael, she whispered. The name came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It meant warrior in the old tongue. His name is Kael. The baby, Kael, wailed again, his tiny fist punching at the air like he was already fighting the world. Mira worked quickly, cutting the cord and wrapping him in clean cloth. He needs to stay warm. Premature babies can't regulate their body temperature, and you need stitches. A lot of them. Is she going to be all right? Draven's voice came from the doorway, rough with something that sounded like concern. If the bleeding stops, yes. Mira didn't look up from her work. If it doesn't... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Lyra felt consciousness starting to slip away, the edges of her vision going dark again. But she forced herself to stay present, to keep her eyes on her son. He was so fragile, so vulnerable. If she died now, what would happen to him? I survived exile. I survived the Wither Reach. I survived Caden's hunters. I survived childbirth in the middle of a war. I'm not dying now. Lyra! Draven was suddenly beside her, his large hand on her shoulder. Stay awake. Look at me. She did. His gold eyes were sharp, intense, holding her to the world through sheer force of will. That's it. Keep your eyes open. Stay with us. The battle, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. What's happening up there? My wolves are holding, barely. But without Caden, the Blackridge pack is fractured. They're fighting amongst themselves as much as they're fighting us. Brock will take command, Lyra said, Caden's second. He's smart, ruthless. He'll rally them. Then we'll deal with Brock when the time comes. Another contraction came. Afterbirth, Mira called it, and Lyra's world narrowed to pain again. But this time it was shorter, more manageable.
When it passed, she was still conscious, still alive. Mira finished the stitching and stepped back, wiping blood from her hands onto her apron. "You're lucky. The tears weren't as bad as I feared. But you need rest. Weeks of it. No fighting, no running, nothing but feeding that baby and healing."
"That's not an option," Lyra said flatly. "It has to be. Brock won't stop. Not now that Caden's dead. He'll want revenge, and he knows where I am." Draven exchanged a long look with Mira. "She's right. We bought time, but this isn't over. If anything, killing Caden made things worse. Now it's personal." "Then what do we do?" Mira asked, her voice tight with frustration. "We finish it." Draven's voice was cold, final. "I'm going back up there. I'm going to offer Brock one chance to retreat with his pack intact. If he refuses, I'll kill him and every wolf that stands with him." "You can't fight an entire pack alone," Lyra said. "I'm not alone. I have 50 warriors up there, well-trained, loyal. Blackridge has 70. You're outnumbered. Then I'll even the odds." He turned toward the door. "Wait." Lyra struggled to sit up, ignoring Mira's sharp protest and the pulling sensation in her stitches. "There's another way." Draven paused. "What way?" "I told Caden his bloodline wasn't legitimate. I made it up in the moment to distract him, to get close enough to use the poison. But what if it's actually true?" Draven frowned, turning back to face her. "What are you talking about?" "My mother was the pack's record keeper before she became a healer. She had access to all the genealogies, bloodline documents, marriage records, everything. When I was a child, maybe 6 or 7, I remember her talking to herself while she worked. She mentioned irregularities, discrepancies in the Thorne family line, things that didn't add up. You think Garrick Thorne stole his position? I think it's possible. My mother was executed for dark magic, but what if that was just a cover? What if she discovered something about the Thorne bloodline that Garrick didn't want anyone to know?" Draven's expression shifted, becoming thoughtful. "That's a big if." "It's better than a massacre," Lyra said, "and I know where the records are kept. In the old archive building on the south side of Blackridge territory. If we can get there, if we can find proof, Mira interrupted, her voice sharp. "You just gave birth. You're not going anywhere." "I'm the only one who knows what to look for," Lyra said. "The records are coded, color-coded by family, cross-referenced by date and type. I spent years watching my mother work with them before she died. I know the system." "Then you'll explain it to someone else," Mira said firmly. "There's no time for that, and besides—" Lyra met Draven's eyes. "I'm the only one they might hesitate to kill on sight. If they catch your warriors in their territory, it's an act of war. But me? I'm already exiled, already declared dead. I'm a ghost. I can move through places your warriors can't." That was only partially true. If any Blackridge wolf spotted her, they'd probably kill her immediately, but it sounded convincing. Draven studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're serious about this?" "Completely. You could die." "I'm already supposed to be dead. What's the difference?" She looked down at Kael, sleeping peacefully against her chest. "But if we can prove the Thorn line is false, the entire Blackridge pack will turn on Garrick. The war ends without more bloodshed. And if we can't prove it, then we're no worse off than we are now." Draven's jaw worked. He looked at Mira. "Can she physically do it?" "Absolutely not," Mira said flatly. "She's lost blood, she's been torn open, and she has a newborn who needs her every 2 hours. This is insanity." "That's not what I asked. Can she physically survive the journey?" Mira's expression hardened. "If she keeps the bleeding under control and doesn't tear her stitches open, maybe. Maybe. But it's a terrible idea, and I'm officially advising against it." "Noted." Draven turned back to Lyra. "If we do this, we do it my way. You follow orders, no arguments, no heroics. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. Understood?" "Understood." "And the baby stays here with Mira." Lyra's arms tightened instinctively around Kael. "No." "Lyra, ikakul." I said no. I just spent 7 months carrying him while everyone in the world tried to kill us. I'm not leaving him behind now. He'll slow us down, make noise, possibly get us all killed. Then we'll be fast and quiet." She looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face.
I won't leave him. Not for anything. Not for anyone. Draven sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're going to be the death of me, you know that? Probably. Fine. He comes. But if things go wrong, if we're about to be caught, you give him to me and you run. No arguments. Deal? It went against every maternal instinct she had, but she nodded. Deal. Then we leave in 10 minutes. Mira, get her ready. They left through a tunnel Lyra hadn't known existed, a narrow passage carved into the mountain that emerged nearly a mile from the compound's main gates. Draven moved with the silent efficiency of someone who'd used escape routes like this before, probably more than once. Mira had wrapped Kyle in multiple layers of soft cloth and fashioned a sling that strapped him securely against Lyra's chest. The baby was so small he barely made a bulge under her heavy cloak. He'll need to feed every 2 hours, Mira had said while tying the final knot. Don't ignore it, and keep him warm. Premature babies can't regulate their own body temperature properly. I will. And if the bleeding gets worse, if you feel dizzy or weak, you stop immediately. Promise me. I promise. Mira hadn't looked convinced, but she'd stepped back. Bring them back alive, she'd said to Draven. That's the plan. Now moving through the dark forest with Draven and 2 of his warriors, Lyra was starting to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. Every step sent pain shooting through her torn body, and Kyle's weight, slight as it was, felt like carrying a boulder after the first mile. But she didn't complain. Didn't slow down. Just kept moving, one foot in front of the other, the way she'd learned to do in the Wither Reach. Draven had brought 2 others, a scarred female warrior named Essa with eyes like flint, and a young scout called Finn, who couldn't have been more than 19. Both moved through the trees like ghosts, barely making a sound. They traveled in complete silence, sticking to the shadows, avoiding roads and clearings. The moon was 3/4 full, providing just enough light to see by. It took nearly 3 hours to reach the Blackridge border. They crouched in thick underbrush, watching the sentries patrol the perimeter. 4 wolves in their animal forms spaced evenly along the border, alert but not expecting trouble from this direction. There's a gap in the patrol pattern, Finn whispered, his voice barely audible. 30 seconds between passes, southwest corner. We can slip through if we time it right. And the archive building? Draven asked. Isolated, like she said. South side of the territory. But there's a problem. What problem? It's right next to Alpha Garrick's personal compound. Stones throw away. We get caught there, we're as good as dead. Then we don't get caught. Draven looked at Lyra. You still sure about this? She nodded, though her heart was hammering hard enough to hurt. All right. Finn takes point. Essa covers the rear. I stay with Lyra. We move fast and quiet. If anyone spots us, we abort immediately and run. No heroics. No last stands. We just run. Clear? They all nodded. Then let's go. They moved during the 30-second gap, slipping across the border like shadows given form. Lyra's breath came in short, controlled gasps. Every movement pulled at her stitches, sent fresh waves of pain through her core, but she bit down on the inside of her cheek and kept moving. Behind her cloak, Kyle stirred but didn't cry. Stay quiet, little one. Please, please stay quiet. The archive building was exactly where she remembered, a squat stone structure with narrow windows and a heavy wooden door. It looked abandoned, forgotten. Probably most of the current pack didn't even know what it was for. Blackridge wolves weren't exactly scholars, perfect for what they needed. Draven tested the door, locked. Finn, can you... Already on it. The young scout produced a set of lockpicks from his belt and went to work on the old mechanism. His fingers moved with practiced precision. 10 seconds later, something clicked, and the door swung open with a soft creak. They slipped inside quickly, pulling the door shut behind them. The interior was dark, dusty, filled with rows of wooden shelves packed with leather-bound books and rolled scrolls. The air smelled like old parchment, mildew, and decades of neglect. Moonlight filtered through the narrow windows, casting long shadows. Where? Draven asked quietly. Bloodline records are kept in the back section. They're color-coded by family name. Thorn lineage should be marked in red leather. Lyra moved between the shelves, her eyes scanning, trying to remember the layout from when she was a child accompanying her mother. There. A section of red-bound volumes,
arranged chronologically by date. She pulled the oldest one, dating back nearly 70 years, and carefully spread it open on a dusty wooden table near the window. "What exactly are we looking for?" Essa asked, keeping watch at the door, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. "Inconsistencies, gaps in the record, changes in handwriting or ink color. Anything that suggests the bloodline was broken or falsified at some point." Lyra's fingers traced down the entries, reading by the weak moonlight. Names, dates, bloodline confirmations, witnesses. Everything seemed orderly and legitimate for the first generation. The second generation, same thing. The third, no problems. Then, approximately 40 years ago, something changed. "Here," she breathed, her fingers stopping on a particular entry. "Look at this." She pointed to an entry documenting how Garrick Thorne's father, Marcus Thorne, had taken the alpha position. It says Marcus took the position from his older brother, Kellen. According to this, Kellen died of a sudden illness before he could produce an heir, making Marcus the legitimate successor. "So?" Draven frowned, leaning over her shoulder. "So look at the ink." She tilted the page toward the moonlight. "See how this entry and the 3 entries after it are written in slightly different ink than everything else on the page? The color's off, more brown than black. And look at the handwriting. It's similar but not identical to the entries before and after." Finn squinted at the page. "You're saying someone added these later?" "Forged them," Lyra said, her voice shaking slightly. "I think Kellen didn't die of illness at all. I think he was murdered, and Marcus took his place by force, then altered the official records to make it look legitimate." "That's a serious accusation," Draven said. "Can you prove it?" "There should be supporting documents. Death certificates, healer records documenting the illness, witness statements from the elders who were alive at the time." She began pulling down adjacent volumes, searching through them systematically. If Kellen died naturally of illness, there would be extensive documentation. It was standard practice. But if those records are missing or inconsistent, she found what she was looking for 5 minutes later, a separate ledger tucked behind the main bloodline records, nearly falling apart from age. Healer logs from 40 years ago. She flipped to the relevant date range and felt her blood run cold. "Here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Kellen Thorne, age 31, cause of death listed as silver poisoning, witnessed and documented by healer Lyra Vance." The room went absolutely silent. "That's your mother," Draven said quietly. "Yes." Lyra's hands were shaking now. "She witnessed his death. She documented it as murder. Silver poisoning is never accidental. It's deliberate, malicious, and she signed her name to it." "And Marcus Thorne had her executed 10 years later to keep her quiet," Essa said from the doorway. "Which means Garrick's entire claim to the alpha position is built on his father's murder of the rightful heir." Lyra looked up, her eyes blazing. "The Blackridge Pack has been following a false bloodline for 40 years. Every decision Garrick made, every law he enforced, every wolf who died under his command, all of it built on lies and murder." "If we bring this to the pack," Draven began. A howl split the night, close, too close. Then another and another. "They found us," Essa hissed, her blade already drawn. "Multiple contacts, coming fast from 3 directions." "How many?" Draven demanded. "At least 10, maybe more." "Can we make it back to the border?" "Not carrying her and a baby. They'll run us down in under a minute." Draven's jaw clenched. He grabbed the healer's ledger and the bloodline volume. "Then we fight our way out. Finn, you take—" "No," Lyra interrupted. "There's another way." "What way?" "We use what we found. Right now." She stood, clutching Kyle against her chest with one arm. "We don't run. We confront them, show them the proof, force them to see the truth." "That's insane," Finn said. "They'll kill us before we get 2 words out." "Maybe," Lyra said. "Or maybe they'll hesitate just long enough to listen. These wolves aren't mindless killers. They're scared, angry, confused because their future alpha just died. If we can give them a reason to doubt Garrick, a real documented reason, some of them might break ranks." "And if they don't?" Essa asked. "Then we're dead either way. But at least this way there's a chance." The howls were getting closer. They had maybe a minute before the Blackridge wolves surrounded the building. Draven looked at her, his gold eyes searching her face. Then he nodded sharply. All right, we do it your way. But stay behind me. And if things go wrong, I run. She adjusted Kael's sling, making sure he was secure. They stepped out of the archive building just as the first wolves arrived. Brock was leading them, the massive gray wolf with scars across his muzzle, Caden's second in command and most loyal follower. He shifted to human form as his pack surrounded them, at least 15 wolves in total, all teeth and fury. Well, well, Brock said, his voice dripping with venom. The cursed bitch returns to the scene of her crimes. How convenient. We're not here to fight, Draven said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of lethal promise. We're here to show you the truth. The truth? Brock laughed, harsh and bitter. The truth is she murdered Caden, poisoned him like the snake she is, and now she's going to pay for it. Caden violated the exile accord, Lyra said, stepping forward despite Draven's warning hand on her arm. He hunted me in neutral territory. He tried to murder me and my unborn child. Everything he did was illegal under pack law. He had every right, Brock snarled. You carry corrupted blood. Your whole cursed family— My family was murdered, Lyra interrupted, her voice rising. Murdered by your alpha to hide his crimes, and I have proof. That got their attention. The wolves shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. What crimes? One of them asked, a younger female with brown fur and uncertain eyes. Lyra held up the ledger. Marcus Thorne, Garrick's father, murdered his own brother Kellen 40 years ago to steal the alpha position. My mother witnessed it, documented it, and Garrick had her executed to keep the truth buried. That's a lie, Brock said, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his voice now. Is it? Lyra opened the ledger to the relevant page. Silver poisoning, documented by healer Ilara Vance, my mother, the same woman Garrick accused of dark magic and had executed 10 years later. Why would he wait 10 years if she was really practicing dark magic? Why not execute her immediately? Because she knew, the brown-furred female said slowly, shifting to human form. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with sharp, intelligent eyes. She knew about the murder, and he needed time to discredit her first. Exactly, Lyra said. And look at the bloodline records. The entries documenting Marcus's succession are forged, different ink, different handwriting. Someone altered them after the fact. Show me, the female demanded. Lyra held out the bloodline volume, pointing to the relevant entries. The female studied them carefully, her expression growing darker. She's right, the female said finally. These have been tampered with. I've seen enough official documents to recognize a forgery. This proves nothing, Brock roared. Old documents, suspicious ink, that could be anything. Deterioration, mistakes, or it could be exactly what she says it is, another wolf said, an older male with gray in his fur. I remember when Ilara Vance was executed. I was young, but I remember. It never sat right with me. She was a good healer, honest. Why would she suddenly turn to dark magic? Because she was cursed, Brock insisted. Or because she knew something that threatened the Alpha, Lyra said. Something worth killing for, worth lying for, worth building 40 years of false legitimacy on top of. The wolves were murmuring now, arguing amongst themselves. The certainty was cracking. Even if this is all true, Brock said, his voice desperate now, it changes nothing. Garrick is still our alpha. His bloodline is false, Draven cut in, his voice like iron. Which means every law, every decree, every decision made under his authority is illegitimate, including Caden's rejection of Lyra, including the order to execute her child, all of it built on a foundation of lies and murder. No, Brock whispered, but the fight was draining out of him. No, this can't be. It's true, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Alpha Garrick Thorne stood at the edge of the gathering, flanked by a dozen of his personal guard. He looked old suddenly, his face drawn, his shoulders slumped, like he'd aged a decade in a single night. Father? Brock's voice cracked. What are you? The girl is telling the truth, Garrick said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness. All of it. Shock rippled through the pack like a physical wave. My father murdered Kellen,
Garrick continued, his gaze distant. Poisoned him with pure silver over the course of 3 days. Made it look like a wasting illness. But Alara Vance was too good at her job. She recognized the signs, documented everything. Why didn't she report it? The brown-furred female asked. She did. To me. Garrick's laugh was bitter. She came to me privately, thinking I'd want to set things right. Restore Kellen's line to power. Do the honorable thing. Instead, His voice caught. I spent the next 10 years systematically destroying her reputation, planting evidence of dark magic, turning the pack against her, and then I had her executed in front of everyone, including her 8-year-old daughter. Lyra felt tears burning in her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Why? She asked, her voice raw. Why tell us this now? Garrick finally met her eyes. Because I'm tired. 40 years of lying. 40 years of looking over my shoulder. 40 years of knowing that everything I built was rotten at the core. He drew a blade from his belt, a ceremonial knife with a silver handle. The law is clear. A false alpha, once exposed, must answer for his crimes. Father, no! Brock started forward. Stay back! Garrick's voice cracked like a whip. He looked at his pack, the wolves who'd followed him, trusted him, bled for him. I failed you, all of you. I let my father's sins become my own, let them poison everything we were supposed to stand for. He turned the blade in his hand, studying it. Any of you want to be the one? He asked. Want to avenge all those I wronged, all those who died believing in a lie? No one moved. No one spoke. No? Garrick's mouth twisted in something that might have been a smile. Then I suppose I'll have to do it myself. Wait, Lyra started to say, but it was too late. Garrick drove the silver blade into his own heart with both hands, bearing it to the hilt. He was dead before his body hit the ground. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then, slowly, one by one, the Blackridge wolves dropped to their knees. Not in grief, in submission, to Lyra. No, Lyra whispered, taking an involuntary step backward. No, I'm not. I can't. You exposed the corruption, the brown-furred female said, still kneeling. You brought truth to light after 40 years of darkness. That makes you the one who broke the false bloodline. But I'm not. I don't want to lead, Lyra protested. I'm just trying to survive, to protect my son. You did more than survive, an older wolf said. You fought back. You refused to accept the lies we'd all been living under. That takes strength we haven't seen in decades. Brock was still standing, his fists clenched, his face twisted with rage and grief, and something that might have been shame. This is madness, he spat. She's an outsider. She murdered our future alpha. Our false future alpha, the brown-furred female corrected gently. Caden had no legitimate claim. Neither did Garrick. The true bloodline died with Kellen 40 years ago. Then who does have a claim? Brock demanded. No one, the female said simply, which means we're free to choose for ourselves. For the first time in 40 years, we can choose an alpha based on strength and merit instead of corrupted bloodlines. She looked at Lyra. You proved yourself stronger than all of us, smarter, braver. You survived things that would have killed any of us. You deserve to lead. I don't want to lead Blackridge, Lyra said firmly. I want nothing to do with this pack. You exiled me, cast me out, tried to kill my child. Why would I ever want to lead you? Because we need you, the female said quietly. Because we're lost. We've been following false alphas and corrupt laws for so long we don't know what's real anymore. We need someone who knows what it's like to suffer, to be cast out, to fight for every breath. Lyra looked around at the kneeling wolves, some of whom had spat at her during the rejection ceremony, some of whom had cheered for her execution, and she felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. You want me to lead? She said, her voice soft but carrying. Fine. Here's my first order. You're going to tear down every corrupt law, every unjust tradition, every piece of false honor you've been hiding behind, and you're going to rebuild from the ground up. She looked at Brock. Starting with you. You have a choice. Bend the knee and help us fix what's broken, or walk away and never come back. Brock stared at her, his jaw working. For a long moment, she thought he'd choose violence. Then, slowly, he knelt.
I bend the knee, he said, his voice rough. But I don't forgive. And I don't forget. Good, Lyra said. Neither do I. She looked at Draven, who'd been standing silently through the whole exchange. I'll need help. I don't know how to run a pack. Then learn, Draven said, and there was respect in his eyes. But you're right. You can't do it alone. I'll lend you advisors, resources, whatever you need to stabilize things. Why would you do that? Because a strong, stable Black Ridge pack benefits everyone. And because... He paused. Because I think you might actually succeed where others have failed. Lyra looked down at Kyle, who'd somehow slept through the entire confrontation. His tiny face was peaceful, unaware of how drastically his world had just changed. We're not outcasts anymore, she thought. We're not prey. We're something else entirely. She looked up at the assembled Blackridge wolves, then at Draven and his warriors. All right, she said. Let's get to work. But even as she said it, she felt something wrong, a prickle at the back of her neck, a sense of being watched. She turned, scanning the tree line. There, a shadow that didn't quite belong, movement where there should be none. Draven, she said quietly, we're not alone. His hand went to his weapon. Where? North tree line, 30 yards. The figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Brock's younger brother, Ren, a wolf Lyra had barely noticed before. He was holding something in his hands, a crossbow, aimed directly at her chest. I'm sorry, Ren said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. But someone has to restore order. Someone has to make the hard choices. He fired. The bolt flew true, straight toward Lyra's heart. And then Draven was there, his body colliding with hers, knocking her sideways. The bolt meant for her chest buried itself deep in Draven's shoulder instead. He grunted, stumbling but not falling. Essa and Finn were already moving, tackling Ren before he could reload. The crossbow clattered to the ground. Draven! Lyra scrambled to her feet, Kale screaming now from being jostled. You're fine, he gritted out, though blood was already soaking through his shirt. It's not silver, just steel. I'll heal. But his face had gone pale, and his breathing was labored. The bolt had hit something vital. Mira, Lyra said, her voice sharp with command. Someone get Mira, now. But they were miles from the Northern Reach compound, miles from safety. And Draven, the Alpha King who'd saved her life, who'd sheltered her, who'd just taken a bolt meant for her, was bleeding out in the dirt. Someone get pressure on that wound. Lyra dropped to her knees beside Draven, her hands already moving to assess the damage. The crossbow bolt had punched through his shoulder at an angle, missing the heart, but tearing through muscle and possibly nicking the lung. Blood was spreading fast. Too fast. I'm fine, Draven grunted, trying to sit up. You're not fine. You're bleeding out. She looked up at the assembled wolves. I need clean cloth, water, and something to bind with, now. For a moment, no one moved. They just stared. These Blackridge wolves who'd spent their lives following orders, suddenly faced with a woman they'd exiled giving them commands. Now! Her voice cracked like a whip. They scattered. 3 wolves shifted and ran toward the nearest structures. Another stripped off his shirt and handed it to her. Lyra pressed the fabric against the wound, applying pressure. Draven hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. Stupid, she muttered, taking a bolt for me. What were you thinking? I was thinking you're holding a baby, and you just became the only thing holding 2 packs together. His voice was strained but steady. Can't let you die. Not yet. Very practical. I'm a practical man. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Then she saw how much blood was soaking through the makeshift bandage, and the fear came roaring back. Kyle was still screaming, strapped to her chest, sensing her panic. She couldn't comfort him and keep pressure on Draven's wound at the same time. Here, the brown-furred female, still in human form, appeared at her side. Let me take him. Lyra's arms tightened instinctively. I don't even know your name. Sarah. I was one of the pack's scouts. She held out her arms. I have 3 younger siblings. I know how to hold a baby. Lyra hesitated, then carefully lifted Kyle from the sling and passed him to Sarah. The woman took him with surprising gentleness, cradling him against her shoulder and making soft, shushing sounds. Thank you, Lyra said. Don't thank me yet, just save him. Sarah nodded toward Draven. The other wolves returned with supplies, a pitcher of water, clean bandages torn from someone's cloak, a flask of something that smelled like strong alcohol. Lyra worked quickly, her healer training taking over. She cut away Draven's blood-soaked shirt with a knife, exposing the wound. The bolt was still embedded, the shaft protruding at an ugly angle. This is going to hurt, she warned. It already hurts. It's going to hurt worse. She wrapped her hand around the bolt's shaft. On 3. 1. She yanked it out on 1. Draven roared, his body going rigid. The wolves around them flinched back, but the bolt came free, and more importantly, there was no gush of arterial blood. She'd been right. It had missed the major vessels. She poured alcohol directly into the wound. Draven's curses turned the air blue. Almost done, she said, threading a needle with steady hands despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. Just need to close it. You're enjoying this? A little. She stitched quickly, pulling the torn flesh back together with practiced efficiency. It wasn't pretty. She didn't have time for pretty, but it would hold. When she finished, she wrapped clean bandages around his shoulder and tied them tight. There. You'll live. You sound disappointed. Terrified, actually. She sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of how badly her own body was shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her hollow and cold. If you died because of me, I didn't. His good hand came up, rough fingers brushing her cheek. The gesture was so unexpected, she froze. You saved my life once in the Wither Reach. I'm just returning the favor. Before she could respond, Essa and Finn dragged Ren forward and threw him down in front of them. The young wolf was bleeding from a split lip where someone had hit him, his hands bound behind his back. Talk, Essa said, her voice cold. Why'd you do it? Ren looked up at Lyra with eyes full of hate. Because you're destroying everything. 40 years of order, of tradition, of strength, gone. Because one exiled healer with a bastard child shows up with some old papers, and suddenly everyone forgets who they are. Those old papers prove your entire leadership was built on murder, Lyra said. So what? Ren spat blood. My grandfather murdered to take power. Every alpha in every pack has blood on their hands. That's how it works. The strong rule. The weak submit. You think showing them some records changes that? It changes everything, Sarah said, still holding Kael. It means we've been dying for a lie, fighting for a lie, exiling and executing people for a lie. You want to talk about execution? Ren laughed, bitter and sharp. What do you think happens now? You think she's just going to forgive us? Forget what we did to her? He looked at Lyra. Your mother is dead because of us. You were exiled, hunted, nearly killed. Your son was marked for death before he was even born. And now you're in charge. So what's it going to be, mercy or justice? The question hung in the air like smoke. Every eye turned to Lyra. She looked at Ren, young, maybe 22, raised in a pack where strength meant cruelty and power meant domination. He genuinely believed what he was saying, believed that mercy was weakness. Justice, she said finally. Ren's expression twisted with satisfaction. There it is, the true face of justice, Lyra repeated, louder, which means you get a trial, a real one, with evidence and witnesses, not a show execution in front of a mob. She looked at Brock. Lock him up, guard him. When things are stable, we'll convene a proper council and decide his fate according to law, real law, not the corrupted version we've been living under. Ren stared at her, confusion replacing the hate. You're not going to kill me? Not today. She stood, wincing as her stitches pulled. But if you try something like this again, I won't be so generous. Brock signaled to 2 of his wolves, who hauled Ren to his feet and dragged him away. The young wolf kept looking back over his shoulder like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. That was a mistake, Essa said quietly once he was gone. Showing mercy to someone who tried to kill you. It makes you look weak. Maybe, Lyra said, or maybe it shows I'm not just another version of what came before. Draven struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. Lyra moved to support him, but he waved her off. I can stand. Barely. Barely is enough. He looked at the assembled wolves.
Blackridge and Northern Reach, standing together in an uneasy truce. We need to move. Dawn's coming, and we have wounded on both sides who need real care. The Northern Reach compound is closer, Finn pointed out. No. Lyra surprised herself by saying it. We go to Blackridge, to their main compound. That's insane, Essa said. It's hostile territory. We'd be walking into a trap. It's my territory now, Lyra said, or so everyone keeps telling me. If I'm going to lead these wolves, I need to face them. All of them, not just the ones who happen to be here tonight. She's right, Sarah said, bouncing Kale gently as he fussed. Word of what happened here will spread fast. By dawn, the whole pack will know Garrick is dead and she killed Caden. If she doesn't show up, if she hides, they'll see it as weakness. The pack will fracture. And if she shows up, they might just tear her apart, Brock said. But there was something in his voice that wasn't quite hostility anymore. Respect, maybe, or at least recognition. Then you'll have to convince them not to, Lyra said, meeting his eyes. You were Caden's second, Garrick's most loyal enforcer. If you stand with me, others will follow. If I don't, we're back to civil war. Brock's jaw worked. I don't like you. I don't trust you.
But I'm tired of watching this pack tear itself apart. He looked at the other Blackridge wolves. We go to the compound, together. Anyone who has a problem with the new alpha can take it up with me. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was enough. They moved out as a group, wounded helping wounded, Northern Reach warriors walking alongside former enemies. Lyra retrieved Kael from Sarah, strapping him back against her chest. He'd finally stopped crying, exhausted from the chaos. Draven walked beside her, one hand pressed against his bandaged shoulder. He'd lost a lot of blood, and his face was pale in the pre-dawn light, but he kept moving. You didn't have to do this, Lyra said quietly. Any of this. You could have just let them kill me back in the Wither Reach. Would have been easier. Probably. He glanced at her. But then I would have missed watching you poison a future alpha, give birth during a battle, and accidentally become the leader of the pack that exiled you. That's been interesting. Is that what you call it? I call it a lot of things, most of them not appropriate in present company. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the crushing weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders, Lyra laughed, a short, startled sound that surprised even her. They reached the Blackridge compound as the sun broke over the horizon. The main gate stood open, always open, a symbol of the pack's strength and confidence. No need for locks when you were the dominant force in the region, or at least they had been. Wolves lined the walls and clustered in the central courtyard, easily 60 or 70 of them. Word had spread fast. They knew something had happened, but not what. The air was thick with tension and confusion. Lyra stepped through the gates first, her head high despite every instinct screaming at her to run. Behind her, Draven and the others followed, Blackridge and Northern Reach walking together. The courtyard fell silent. Then someone recognized her. That's the Vance girl, the exiled one. She's got Caden's bastard with her. Where's Alpha Garrick? Where's Caden? The voices built into a roar. Wolves pressed forward, shifting between forms, snarling and snapping. Lyra felt the killing intent radiating off them like heat. This was a mistake. We're going to die here. Then Brock stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Alpha Garrick is dead, he roared. Caden is dead. And before they died, the truth came out. The crowd stilled, shocked into silence. The Thorn bloodline was false, Brock continued, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Built on murder and lies going back 40 years. Garrick himself confirmed it before he took his own life. Everything we believed, everything we fought for, it was built on corruption. That's impossible, someone shouted. You're lying. I have the proof, Lyra said, stepping forward and holding up the ledger and bloodline records. Documents showing how Marcus Thorn murdered his brother and falsified the succession. Healer records signed by my mother, witnessing Kellen Thorn's death by silver poisoning, all of it hidden for decades. And we're just supposed to believe you? An older wolf called out. The exiled healer who murdered our future alpha. Caden tried to execute her and her unborn child without cause, Sarah said, moving to stand beside Lyra. He violated the exile accord. He brought war to the Northern Reach based on false authority. If anyone murdered someone, it was him trying to kill her. More voices joined in, some supporting Lyra, others calling for her death. The courtyard was splitting, fracturing along fault lines of loyalty and doubt. It was going to come to violence. Lyra could feel it building. Then Draven stepped forward. His presence alone was enough to quiet some of the shouting. Even wounded and bleeding, he radiated authority in a way that made other alphas look like children playing dress-up. "I am Draven Kor, Alpha King of the Northern Reach," he said, his voice resonating through the space. "I witnessed Garrick's confession. I've seen the evidences, and I'm here to tell you that Lyra Vance speaks the truth." "Why should we trust you?" someone yelled. "You're our enemy." "Because I have no reason to lie," Draven shot back. "If I wanted to destroy Blackridge, I could have done it a dozen times over the past 5 years. But I didn't. Because I believe in the old laws, the real ones, not the corrupted versions. And those laws say that when a false alpha is exposed, the pack has the right to choose new leadership."
"So we just hand power to an outsider?" The older wolf again, his face twisted with anger. "To the daughter of a supposed traitor." "My mother was no traitor," Lyra said, her voice sharp. "She was murdered for trying to expose the truth, just like anyone else who got too close to Garrick's secrets. How many others died over the years? How many wolves were exiled or executed because they knew too much?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She could see them thinking, remembering. How many suspicious deaths had there been? How many sudden disappearances? "I'm not asking you to follow me because I'm special," Lyra continued. "I'm not asking you to follow me because I want power. I'm asking you to give me a chance to fix what's broken, to build something better than what we had." "And if we refuse?" the older wolf demanded. "Then you're welcome to challenge me." Lyra's voice was steady. "That's how alpha succession works, right? The old way? Anyone who thinks they can lead better steps forward, and we settle it." The courtyard went absolutely silent. Challenge trials were brutal, bloody affairs. Most ended in death. And Lyra, even having survived everything she'd survived, was still a healer, not a warrior. Challenging her should have been easy. But no one moved, because they'd all heard what she'd done. Survived exile in the Witherreach. Poisoned Caden at close range. Given birth during a battle. Walked into enemy territory and walked out with their alpha's confession. She'd already proven herself in ways most of them never would. "No one?" Lyra asked, her voice carrying. "No one wants to challenge. Then I'm going to ask you one more time. Will you follow me? Will you help me rebuild this pack into something we can actually be proud of?" "I will." Sarah stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "I bend the knee to Alpha Lyra Vance." "Me too," another voice said. A young male, maybe 19, with a scarred face. "She's got more courage than any of the Thorns ever did." One by one, wolves began to kneel. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But enough. Enough to tip the balance. The older wolf who'd been arguing watched it happen, his face going from red to pale. Then slowly, reluctantly, he too dropped to one knee. Brock was the last. He stood there, jaw clenched, looking at Lyra with an expression that mixed resentment and something else. Then he knelt. "I bend the knee to Alpha Lyra Vance," he said, the words clearly costing him. "May you lead better than those who came before." Lyra stood in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by kneeling wolves, and felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders like a physical thing. She was 20 years old. She'd given birth less than 12 hours ago. She could barely stand without her stitches pulling. And she was now responsible for over 100 lives. "What have I done?" Draven's hand touched her elbow, steadying her. "Congratulations, Alpha," he said quietly. "Now comes the hard part." This wasn't the hard part? This was just the beginning. She looked down at Kael, sleeping peacefully against her chest, oblivious to the fact that his mother had just become one of the most powerful wolves in the territory. "All right," she said, her voice firmer now. "First order of business. We treat the wounded, all of them, Northern Reach and Blackridge both. No one gets left to suffer because of which pack they're from. Second," she continued, looking at Brock, "we convene a council. Every wolf who wants a voice gets one. We're going to go through every law, every tradition, every custom. Anything built on the Thorn corruption gets torn down. Anything worth keeping stays." That could take months," Brock said. "Then it takes months. We do it right this time." She paused. "Third, we send word to the other packs in the region. Let them know Blackridge has new leadership.
Invite them to send representatives. We're not hiding anymore. We're not pretending things are fine when they're not. Some will see that as weakness, Essa warned.
Some will, Lyra agreed, but others will see it as strength, as honesty. And right now, we need allies more than we need fear.
She looked at Sarah. You said you're a scout. I need you to map out our territory, all of it. I need to know what resources we have, where the weak points are, everything. Yes, Alpha. And you? She pointed to the young male with the scarred face. What's your name? Cade. Cade, you're in charge of inventory, food, weapons, supplies. I need a full accounting by tomorrow. Yes, Alpha. She kept going, delegating tasks, organizing, building structure from chaos.
Somewhere in the back of her mind, she registered surprise at how naturally it came to her. She'd spent her life following orders, making herself invisible. But now, standing here with the weight of leadership on her shoulders, she found she had opinions, strong ones, about how things should be done. Maybe she'd inherited more from her mother than just healing skills.
The crowd began to disperse, wolves moving to their assigned tasks. Mira appeared, apparently someone had sent for her, and immediately took over treating the wounded. She shot Lyra a look that clearly said, we're going to talk about you going into battle hours after giving birth, but didn't say anything out loud. Draven swayed suddenly, and Lyra caught his arm. You need to sit down. I'm fine. You're not fine. You lost a lot of blood, and you're about to pass out. Sit, now. He started to argue, then seemed to think better of it and lowered himself onto a nearby stone bench. His face was pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air.
Mira, Lyra called, I need you here.
The healer appeared within seconds, took one look at Draven and started cursing.
The stitching is good, but he needs fluids and rest, lots of rest. I don't have time for rest, Draven muttered. You'll make time or you'll die. Your choice.
Mira prepared a tincture and handed it to him.
Drink, all of it. He drank, grimacing at the taste.
Better, Mira said. Then she turned to Lyra. And you? How are your stitches?
Fine.
That's not what I asked. How are your stitches? Lyra shifted uncomfortably. I might have torn a few. Of course you did. Mira grabbed her arm and steered her toward the healer's den. Come on, let's get you fixed before you bleed out and leave this pack without an alpha for the second time in one night. You need to not die. Everything else can wait 10 minutes. Lyra let herself be led away, too exhausted to argue. Behind her, she heard Draven's voice, talking with Brock about securing the perimeter and establishing watch rotations. In the healer's den, her mother's old workspace, she realized with a jolt, Mira had her strip off her blood-soaked clothes and examined the damage. You tore 3 stitches, Mira said, her voice tight with disapproval. You're lucky you didn't tear more. I had to move fast. You had to not die in childbirth. The moving fast could have waited. But her hands were gentle as she repaired the damage, adding new stitches where needed. How's Kyle? Lyra looked at her son, still sleeping in the makeshift sling. He slept through most of it. I don't know if that's a good sign or a terrible one. It means he trusts you to keep him safe, even in chaos. Mira tied off the last stitch. There. You should be fine as long as you actually rest, which I know you won't. I'll try. Sure you will. Mira's expression softened. Your mother would be proud, you know, of what you did today. Exposing the corruption, taking power, all of it. Lyra's throat tightened. I miss her. I was so young when she died. I barely remember her voice. She had a good voice, strong, like yours. Mira squeezed her shoulder. Get some rest. Even an hour will help. Lyra meant to protest, to say she had too much to do. But the moment she lay down on the cot, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes closed almost against her will. She woke to someone shaking her shoulder. Sarah, looking worried. Alpha, you need to wake up. We have a situation. Lyra sat up, wincing. What situation? Scouts reported movement on the eastern border. A lot of movement. Another pack is approaching. Which one? Unknown, but they're flying white flags. White flags meant parley, negotiation, Not war, but it could also be a trap. Lyra stood, checking that Kael was still secure in his sling. He was awake now, making small fussing sounds that meant he'd need to feed soon. "Wake Draven," she said. "And Brock, get everyone to the eastern gates. Full defensive positions, but no one engages unless I give the order." "Yes, Alpha." 10 minutes later, Lyra stood at the eastern gates with 30 wolves at her back. Draven was beside her, still pale but steady. Brock was on her other side, his hand resting on his weapon. The approaching pack numbered maybe 40 wolves. They stopped 100 yards from the gate, and a single figure walked forward. An older woman, maybe 60, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen a lot of winters. She carried a white flag in one hand and nothing else. "I am Thessa Cray," she called out, "Alpha of the Silver Pine Pack. I'm here to speak with the new Black Ridge Alpha." Lyra stepped forward. "I'm Lyra Vance. What do you want?" Thessa's eyebrows rose. "You're younger than I expected, and you're carrying a child. Is that a problem?" "No, just unexpected." Thessa lowered the flag. "I heard what happened, Garrick's death, the exposure of the false bloodline. Word spreads fast in the territories. And you came to take advantage of the chaos?" "I came to offer alliance." Thessa's expression was serious. Silverpine has been watching Black Ridge for years. Watching the corruption spread, the injustices pile up. We've lost wolves to Garrick's paranoia. Good wolves, exiled for speaking truth. If you're really trying to build something better, we want to help. Why should I trust you? Because I'm old enough to remember what the packs used to be like, before the corruption, before the fear. Thessa took a step closer. And because I knew your mother, Alara and I trained together as healers before she came to Blackridge. She was one of the best. When I heard she'd been executed, I knew something was wrong, but I had no proof. No way to challenge Garrick without risking my own pack. Lyra's chest tightened. You knew her? I did, and she would be very proud of what you've done. Thessa held out her hand. So what do you say, Alpha Lyra? Will you accept Silverpine's alliance? Lyra looked back at Draven. He gave a small nod. Your choice. She looked at Brock, who shrugged. Also your choice. Everyone was looking to her to make the decision, to lead. Lyra stepped forward and clasped Thessa's hand. Alliance accepted. Welcome to Blackridge, Alpha Thessa. A cheer went up from both packs. Not loud, not celebratory exactly, but genuine, hopeful. For the first time since this all began, Lyra felt something that wasn't fear or rage or desperate determination. She felt hope. The Alliance feast was Thessa's idea. Packs need rituals, she'd said that first day, standing in the Blackridge courtyard with her silver-streaked hair catching the light. Symbols. Something to mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. Lyra had wanted to argue. There was too much work to do, too many wounds still healing, both literal and metaphorical. But Draven had agreed with Thessa, and even Brock had grudgingly admitted it might help stabilize things. So now, 2 weeks after Garrick's death, the central courtyard of Blackridge had been transformed. Long tables made from rough-hewn timber stretched across the space, laden with food hunted and gathered by wolves from 3 packs working together. Torches burned in iron brackets along the walls, casting dancing shadows. And wolves, Blackridge, Northern Reach, and Silverpine, sat together, talking, laughing, slowly learning to trust. It wasn't perfect. Lyra could see the tension in some shoulders, the way certain wolves still clustered with their own kind, the occasional hard glance across pack lines. But it was better than war. Better than the fractured, paranoid existence they'd all been living. She stood at the head table with Kael strapped against her chest in the sling Mira had made, reinforced, properly padded, designed for a mother who couldn't afford to be helpless. The baby was awake, his dark eyes tracking the movement and firelight with intense focus. He's got your eyes, Sarah said, appearing at her elbow with a cup of something that smelled like honey and herbs. Sharp, like he's already figuring everyone out. I hope not. I'd rather he have a childhood before he has to start navigating pack politics. Lyra took the cup gratefully. Thank you. What is this? Thessa's recipe. She says it helps with milk production and healing. Tastes better than Mira's tonics, at least. That was true. Lyra drank deeply, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The past 2 weeks had been a blur of meetings, decisions, disputes to settle, resources to allocate. She'd barely slept, but slowly, painfully, structure was emerging from the chaos. "How's the Eastern Patrol rotation working out?" she asked. "Better. Mixing the packs on each shift was smart. They're learning to work together instead of just tolerating each other." Sarah paused. "Though there was an incident yesterday. One of Brock's old crew made a comment about Northern Reach dogs and got his nose broken for it." "By who?" "Cade, your inventory manager." Lyra blinked. "Cade's Blackridge born." "Exactly." "He said anyone disrespecting our allies was disrespecting you. Then he punched the guy." Sarah grinned. It was beautiful. Despite herself, Lyra smiled. Small moments like that, Blackridge wolves defending Northern Reach honor, meant more than any formal alliance document. Draven approached from across the courtyard, moving carefully. His shoulder was healing, but slowly. Mira had threatened to chain him to a bed if he didn't rest more, which he'd ignored completely. "You should be sitting," Lyra said as he reached her. "So should you. When's the last time you slept more than 3 hours? When's the last time you followed healer's orders?" "Fair point." He studied the gathering with those sharp gold eyes. "It's working. What you're building here. I didn't think it would, but it is." "You sound surprised." "I am. Most new alphas either rule through fear or get torn apart in the first month. You're doing something different." He paused. "Something better." Before Lyra could respond, a commotion near the gates drew their attention. Wolves were standing, hands moving to weapons. Lyra's heart kicked into overdrive. Then she saw why. A group of wolves approached under white flags, but these weren't from any pack she recognized. There were 8 of them, lean and hard-looking, dressed in traveling clothes worn from long roads. The lead wolf was a woman maybe 30 years old, with a scar running from her temple to her jaw. She stopped at the edge of the courtyard and raised both hands, showing she was unarmed. "I'm looking for Lyra Vance," she called out. "The new Blackridge Alpha." Lyra stepped forward, her hand instinctively going to Kyle. "I'm Lyra. Who are you?" "Marin Cross from the Eastern Territories." The woman's eyes were hard but not hostile. "We've been traveling for 6 days. Heard rumors. Wanted to see if they were true." "What rumors?" "That an exiled healer killed a corrupt alpha, exposed 40 years of lies, and took power through truth instead of violence." Marin's scarred face split into something that might have been a smile. That she's building a pack where justice actually means something, where wolves don't get executed for speaking up. "The rumors are mostly true," Lyra said carefully. "Who's we? Who are you speaking for?" "Other exiles, other outcasts. Wolves who were cast out by their packs for standing against corruption, for refusing to follow false alphas, for being too weak or too different, or just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Marin gestured to the wolves behind her. "We heard you took in an exile, gave her power, made her your scout. That true?" Sarah stepped forward. "That's me. And yes, she did." "Then we're asking the same. We're asking for sanctuary, for a chance to prove ourselves." Marin looked directly at Lyra. "We're not here to take. We're here to build. If you'll have us." Lyra felt every eye in the courtyard turn to her. This was a test, not just for her, but for everything she'd been saying about building something better, about justice and second chances. "How many exiles are there?" she asked. "Total, not just your group." "Hard to say. Dozens, maybe more. Word spreads fast among wolves with nowhere to go." Marin's expression was guarded. "If you're worried about numbers, I'm worried about logistics, food, shelter, integration." Lyra looked at Draven, who nodded slightly, at Thessa, who smiled. "But yes, you're welcome here, all of you, under one condition." "What condition?" "You work, you contribute, you follow the laws we're building, the real ones, not the corrupted versions, and you help us make this place better than what came before." Lyra paused. "If you can do that, you're not exiles anymore. You're pack." Marin's eyes went bright. She dropped to one knee, and the other wolves behind her followed suit. "We accept your terms, Alpha Lyra, and your mercy." "It's not mercy, it's justice." Lyra stepped forward and helped Marin to her feet. "Welcome home?" The courtyard erupted in cheers, not universal, but widespread. Sarah was grinning like she'd won a personal victory. Even Brock looked grudgingly approving. As the new arrivals were led to tables and given food, Thessa appeared at Lyra's side. "You just tripled your political problems," the older alpha said quietly. "Every disgruntled wolf in the territories is going to hear about this. Some will come with good intentions. Others will come looking to take advantage." "I know. And you did it anyway. Because it was right." Lyra looked down at Kael, who'd fallen asleep against her chest. "Because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go, no one to turn to. If I can give others what I didn't have, then you're building something that will last," Thessa finished. "Or get you killed, possibly both." But she was smiling. "Your mother would be proud, and probably terrified." "I'm already terrified," Lyra admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you become like Garrick." Thessa squeezed her shoulder. "Keep questioning yourself, keep doubting. Just don't let it stop you from moving forward." The feast continued late into the night. Somewhere around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with Lyra. She slipped away from the celebration, climbing the stairs to the Alpha's quarters, rooms that had belonged to Garrick that she still couldn't quite believe were now hers. She'd had them completely cleaned and rearranged, but they still felt wrong, too big, too formal. The bed could have fit 5 people. She laid Kael in the carved wooden cradle beside the bed, another gift from Thessa, made by Silverpine craftsmen. He stirred but didn't wake, his tiny fists clenching and unclenching in sleep. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel the weight of everything. 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks since she'd killed Caden, given birth, exposed the corruption, and somehow ended up responsible for hundreds of lives. It felt like years. There was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," she called, too tired to get up. Draven entered, carrying a leather satchel. "Thought you might want this." He set it on the bed. Inside were books, old ones, leather-bound, with pages yellowed by time. "Where did you—" "The archive building. After everything settled, I went back. These were your mother's, her personal journals, notes on healing, pack history, observations." He paused. "I thought you should have them." Lyra's hand shook as she lifted out the first journal. Her mother's handwriting, elegant, precise, covered the pages. Recipes for medicines, sketches of herbs, and in the margins, personal notes. Lyra took her first steps today. 11 months old, she's going to be strong. Tears burned her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "She left you more than just journals." Draven pulled out a sealed letter from the bottom of the satchel. This was hidden in the spine of the largest book, addressed to you. Lyra took the letter with trembling hands. The seal was unbroken, marked with her mother's personal sigil, a simple flower pressed into wax. She broke the seal carefully and unfolded the parchment. "My dearest Lyra, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably confused, angry, and scared. I wish I could be there to explain everything, to hold you, to tell you that none of this is your fault. By now you've probably heard the official story, that I practiced dark magic, that I was corrupted, that my execution was justified. It's all lies. The truth is, I discovered something about the Thorn bloodline that Alpha Marcus couldn't allow to be known. He murdered his brother Kellen to take power, and I witnessed it, documented it. I kept silent at first. I was young, scared, pregnant with you. I thought if I just stayed quiet, we'd be safe. But guilt ate at me. So 10 years later, I went to Garrick, Marcus's son. I thought he'd want to set things right. I was wrong. He gave me a choice. Keep silent and live, or speak truth and die. For 10 years, I kept silent. For you. But eventually, my conscience wouldn't allow it anymore. So I prepared these records, hid them, hoped that someday someone would find them and expose the truth. I knew they'd kill me, but I also knew you'd survive. You're stronger than you think, my darling girl. Stronger than I ever was. If you're reading this, you've probably already done what I couldn't, brought the truth to light. I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud. Remember, healing isn't just about mending wounds. It's about mending systems, communities, the broken places, and how we treat each other. You have a gift for seeing what's wrong and knowing how to fix it. Trust that gift, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I love you. I always will. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see the woman you'd become. Your mother,
Lyra read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully and pressed it against her chest. She knew, she whispered. She knew they'd kill her, and she chose truth anyway. She chose you, Draven said quietly. She chose the chance that you might finish what she started. And now I have. Lyra wiped her eyes. But it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like I'm carrying her weight and mine both. You are. That's what leadership is. Carrying the weight of everyone who came before and everyone who comes after. He moved to the window, looking out over the darkened compound. But you don't have to carry it alone. That's what allies are for, what packs are for. Is that why you helped me? In the Wither Reach? All of this? Because you know what it's like to carry that weight? Partially, he turned back to face her. And partially because when I saw you in those woods, half dead, pregnant, still fighting, I saw something I thought I'd never see again. What? Hope. He smiled, and it transformed his usually hard face into something almost gentle. You made me believe things could be better, the packs could be better. So yes, I helped you. And I'd do it again. Lyra stood, crossed the room, and without thinking about it, wrapped her arms around him in a hug. He stiffened, surprised, then slowly returned it, careful of his injured shoulder. Thank you, she said into his chest. For everything. You're welcome. His voice rumbled. Now get some sleep. You have a council meeting at dawn. I hate those meetings. Everyone hates those meetings, but they're necessary. He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. You're doing well, Lyra. Better than well. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After he left, Lyra climbed into the too large bed and pulled Kael's cradle close. She fell asleep with her hand resting on the cradle's edge, her mother's letter tucked under her pillow. The next month was a controlled storm of activity. The council Lyra had formed, consisting of representatives from all 3 packs, plus several of the newer exiles, met daily to hammer out laws, resolve disputes, and plan for the future. It was messy, loud, sometimes heated enough that Lyra had to physically step between arguing wolves. But it worked. They rewrote the exile laws, making them more humane, requiring evidence and proper trials. They established a justice system with checks and balances where no single alpha could execute or exile on a whim. They created trade agreements with neighboring territories, opened the borders to refugees, and began dismantling the fortress mentality that had defined Blackridge for decades. Not everyone was happy. Some of the older Blackridge wolves grumbled about tradition being destroyed. A few left, unable or unwilling to accept the changes. But most stayed, and slowly, grudgingly, they began to see the benefits of the new system. Disputes got resolved fairly instead of through favoritism. Resources were distributed based on need instead of rank. Wolves who'd been invisible under the old regime, healers, craftsmen, scouts, suddenly had voices and value. It's working, Sarah reported one morning as Lyra nursed Kael in her quarters. The integration, the new laws, all of it. Crime's down. Productivity's up. Even the grumblers are starting to come around. What about the eastern border? Quiet. No challenges. No raids. Word's getting around that we're not an easy target anymore. Sarah grinned. Turns out having 3 packs worth of warriors deters aggression. Any word from the scouts we sent to the Western Territories? They returned last night. The Western packs are interested in talks. Cautious, but interested. Sarah's expression grew more serious. There's also been movement from the Ironwood pack. Their alpha wants a meeting. Lyra's hand stilled on Kael's back. The Ironwood pack was one of the largest in the region, notoriously aggressive and traditional. Their alpha, Calder Voss, was known for his brutality. When? 3 days from now. Neutral ground, as is custom. He's bringing a guard of 20. Then we bring 40. Lyra shifted Kael to her shoulder, patting his back until he burped. I want Draven there. And Thessa. And you. Me? You're my eyes and ears, Sarah. I trust your judgment. Lyra stood, laying Kael in his cradle. Get Brock to select the best fighters from all 3 packs. Mixed unit. I want Ironwood to see our unity. You think Calder's going to challenge you? I think Calder's going to test me, and I need to be ready. 3 days later,
Lyra rode out to meet the Ironwood pack at the Hollow Stone, an ancient meeting ground marked by a massive boulder split down the middle by some long-ago earthquake. It was neutral territory, claimed by no pack, perfect for negotiations. She'd left Kael with Mira, which had been one of the hardest things she'd ever done. But bringing an infant to a potentially hostile meeting was foolish, and Lyra was trying very hard not to be foolish. Calder Voss was already there when they arrived, standing beside the split stone with his guard spread out behind him. He was exactly what Lyra had expected, massive, scarred, with eyes like chips of ice, and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile decades ago. "So you're the exile who took Blackridge," he said as she approached. No greeting, no courtesy, just blunt assessment. "I'm the alpha who inherited a broken pack and fixed it," Lyra corrected. "There's a difference." Calder's eyebrows rose slightly. Bold words from someone so young. "Age has nothing to do with capability." "Doesn't it?" He circled her slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. "I've held Ironwood for 23 years, fought off 7 challenges, killed more wolves than you've probably met. What have you done besides expose some old corruption and make friends with outcasts?" "I survived exile while 7 months pregnant, gave birth during a battle, united 3 packs under a common purpose, reformed a legal system that was rotten to the core." Lyra met his eyes without flinching. "What have you done besides intimidate people and rule through fear?" The Ironwood wolves growled, but Calder held up a hand, silencing them. His expression was unreadable. "You've got spine. I'll give you that." He stopped circling. "I came here to decide whether Ironwood should crush Blackridge while you're weak or wait to see if you actually build something worth respecting." "And your decision?" "I'm still deciding." He leaned closer. "Here's what I see. A young female alpha with an infant trying to hold together an alliance built on idealism. Idealism doesn't survive winter. It doesn't survive famine or war or the basic greed of wolves who want power." "You're right," Lyra said, surprising him. "Idealism alone isn't enough. That's why we're also building on justice, mutual benefit, and strategic strength. The wolves who follow me don't do it because they're afraid. They do it because the system we're creating actually works for them. And when someone stronger comes along, when someone challenges you and wins, then they'll inherit a pack that's worth leading. A pack with real laws, real structure, real unity. Not just a dictatorship waiting to collapse." She paused. "But I don't plan on losing." Calder studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I haven't decided which." He stepped back. "Fine. Ironwood won't challenge Blackridge. For now, we'll watch what you're building. If it works, maybe we'll even join you. If it falls apart, then you'll be there to pick up the pieces. I understand." "Good." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. That exile sanctuary you're running, it's attracting attention. Not all of it friendly. There are wolves in the northern wastes who see it as weakness, who think you're gathering all the rejects and failures in one place. Let them think that. They'll be surprised when those rejects and failures fight like wolves who finally have something worth protecting." Calder's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Maybe you're not as stupid as I thought." He left with his guard, disappearing into the trees. Draven moved to Lyra's side. That went better than expected. "He's going to attack," Lyra said quietly. "Maybe not now, maybe not for months, but eventually he'll test us, and we need to be ready." "You saw that in his eyes?" "I saw it in the way he looked at the territory, like he was measuring it, calculating." "Then we prepare." Draven's hand rested on his weapon. "And when he comes, we show him exactly what rejects and failures can do." 6 months passed. Winter came to the territories, harsh and unforgiving. But the Blackridge compound, now officially called the Alliance territory, weathered it better than anyone expected. The exile program had grown beyond Lyra's wildest projections. Over 200 wolves had joined, bringing skills and perspectives the established packs had been missing. Former outcasts became teachers, craftsmen, hunters, warriors. The weak became strong. The forgotten became essential. Kael was growing fast, hitting milestones that terrified and amazed Lyra in equal measure. At 6 months old, he was already trying to crawl, already responding to his name, already showing signs of the wolf nature that would eventually emerge.
He's going to be a handful, Mira said one morning, watching Kyle pull himself across the floor of the healer's den, determined to reach a basket of herbs. Strong-willed, like his mother. Stubborn, you mean? I said what I said. Mira scooped him up before he could knock over the basket. How are you doing? Really? Lyra paused in grinding herbs. I'm tired. Overwhelmed. Terrified I'm going to make a mistake that gets people killed, but also, she smiled, also happy.
For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. You've earned it. Have I? Lyra looked out the window at the bustling compound. Sometimes I look at all this, at what we've built, and I can't believe it's real, that I'm really doing this. Imposter syndrome, classic new alpha condition. Mira set Kale down, and he immediately resumed crawling toward the herbs. But you're not an imposter. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. How do you know? Because the pack is thriving. Because wolves who were ready to kill each other 6 months ago are now training together. Because you took a broken system and built something better. Mira caught Kyle just before he reached the herbs again. And because you're still questioning yourself, the truly dangerous alphas are the ones who think they're infallible. That evening, Lyra called a full gathering in the courtyard. All 3 packs, plus the exile wolves, plus representatives from 4 other territories that had joined the alliance in recent months. Nearly 500 wolves. She stood before them with Kyle in her arms, Draven on one side and Thessa on the other. 6 months ago, she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd, I was in exile. A nobody. A wolf marked for death, carrying a child that the pack wanted exterminated. I had nothing. Was nothing. According to every law and tradition we'd lived under, I should have died in the Wither Reach. She paused, letting that sink in. But I didn't die. And the reason I didn't is because I met wolves who chose mercy over tradition, who chose truth over comfortable lies, who chose to build something better instead of just maintaining what was broken. She gestured to the crowd. You are those wolves. Every single one of you. You chose to be here, chose to be part of something bigger than yourselves, chose to believe that we could do better than our ancestors. And we have. She shifted Kyle to her other arm. In 6 months, we've cut crime by half, increased our food stores by 1/3, formed alliances with 7 other packs, taken in over 200 exiles and given them purpose. We've built a legal system that actually works, a society where justice means something. She looked around at the faces, young and old, scarred and unscarred from a dozen different backgrounds. This is what we've built together, not through fear, not through violence, but through cooperation and hard work and refusing to accept that things have to be the way they've always been. But we're not done. Her voice hardened. There are still packs out there who rule through corruption, still alphas who abuse their power, still wolves being exiled and executed unjustly. And as long as that continues, our work isn't finished. So I'm proposing something ambitious, something that's never been tried before in the territories. She took a breath. I'm proposing a confederation, a formal alliance of packs committed to real justice, real laws, real accountability, with representatives from each pack, with shared resources and mutual defense, with a system of checks and balances so no single alpha can become a tyrant. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some excited, some skeptical. I know it sounds impossible, Lyra continued. I know tradition says packs should compete, not cooperate. But look at what we've already accomplished by working together. Imagine what we could do if we formalized it, made it permanent. The choice is yours, she said, all of yours. This isn't a dictatorship. If you vote no, we continue as we are. If you vote yes, we try something new, something better. She stepped back. You have 3 days to decide. Talk amongst yourselves, debate, question, then we'll vote. The gathering dispersed, wolves breaking into immediate discussions. Lyra watched them go, suddenly exhausted. That was risky, Thessa said quietly, giving them a choice like that. It was necessary. If I force this, it's just another form of tyranny. Lyra adjusted Kyle, who'd fallen asleep against her shoulder. They need to choose it themselves.
And if they choose no, then we find another way.
But I don't think they will. She smiled. Hope, remember? That's what we're building on. 3 days later, the votes were counted. 87% in favor. The Alliance Confederation was born. The formal ceremony took place under a full moon. Representatives from each member pack stood in a circle around the split stone, while Lyra, holding Kael because she'd learned early that trying to be a leader and a mother separately was impossible, read the founding charter aloud. We, the wolves of the Alliance Confederation, do hereby establish a union based on principles of justice, mutual defense, and shared prosperity. We reject the tyranny of false alphas and corrupt bloodlines. We commit to laws that apply equally to all wolves, regardless of rank or origin. We pledge to protect the vulnerable, welcome the exiled, and build a society our children will be proud to inherit. She looked up from the parchment. These are the principles we stand for. These are the ideals we'll defend. And if any alpha, including me, violates them, they will be held accountable. One by one, the pack representatives stepped forward and signed the charter. Draven, Thessa, Brock, Sarah, Marin, Calder. Yes, even Calder had eventually joined, impressed despite himself, and dozens of others. When the last signature was placed, a cheer went up that probably carried for miles. Lyra stood in the center of it all, holding her son, and felt something shift in her chest. Not the fear and desperation that had driven her for so long. Not even the determination to survive. Something else. Something like peace. That night, after the celebrations died down and the compound finally quieted, Lyra stood on the wall overlooking the territory. Stars blazed overhead, cold and distant and beautiful. Draven found her there. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Too much in my head. She was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about my mother, about how she died trying to expose the truth, how she never got to see it actually change anything. She saw it through you. You're the change she died for. I hope so. Lyra looked at Kael, sleeping peacefully in her arms. I want him to grow up in a world where truth matters, where being different doesn't make you prey, where you don't have to be perfect to be valued. You're building that world. It's happening right now. Sometimes I still feel like the scared exile running through the Wither Reach, like this is all going to vanish and I'll wake up back in that forest, alone and dying. You're not alone anymore? Draven's hand covered hers on the stone wall. You have a pack, multiple packs, allies, friends, people who die for what you've built. That's what scares me. I don't want anyone dying for this. Then we'll fight to keep them alive, together. He paused. You know, when I first saw you in those woods, I thought you'd be dead within a week. Figured I'd saved you just so you could die slower. Thanks for the vote of confidence. But you didn't die. You survived. And then you did the impossible. You took everything that should have destroyed you and used it to build something that might actually last. He smiled. You're the strongest wolf I've ever met, Lyra Vance. And I've met a lot of wolves. Lyra felt tears burning her eyes. I'm not strong. I'm terrified most of the time. Being terrified and doing it anyway is the definition of strength. He squeezed her hand. You've earned everything you have. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Finally, Lyra spoke. Will you stand with me tomorrow when we address the Confederation? I could use the moral support. I'll stand with you tomorrow. And the day after. And every day until you tell me to stop. That might be a while. Good. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, Lyra stood before the full Confederation assembly. Nearly 700 wolves now, with more arriving daily as word spread about the Alliance, and delivered her first official address as Confederation leader. Kyle was strapped to her chest, awake and alert, seeming to study the crowd with those dark, knowing eyes. We stand at a turning point, Lyra began. For generations, our packs have operated on principles of fear, domination, and isolation. The strong ruled, the weak suffered, and anyone who questioned the system was cast out or killed. I know because I lived it. I was that cast-out wolf, that exile, that supposed curse on my pack. But being cast out taught me something. It taught me that the wolves our society discards are often the ones with the most to offer. The outcasts see clearly what those in power miss. The exiles understand what needs to change. She gestured to the crowd. Look around. Half the wolves here were once exiles, outcasts, rejects, and now you're the foundation of something that's changing the territories. So here's my promise to you. As long as I lead, no wolf will be cast out for speaking truth. No wolf will be executed without trial. No wolf will be punished for being different or weak or challenging authority. We're building a society where strength means protecting others, not dominating them. Where power means responsibility, not privilege. Where justice is real, not just a word we use to justify cruelty. It won't be perfect. We'll make mistakes. We'll argue and struggle and sometimes fail, but we'll fail together. And we'll build something better from those failures. She lifted Kyle slightly. I want my son to grow up in that world, in a pack where his value isn't determined by who his father was or what bloodline he carries, but by who he chooses to become. Where he's judged by his actions, not his origins. That's the world we're building. Not just for him, for all of us. For every wolf who was ever told they weren't good enough, weren't strong enough, weren't worthy. She looked around at the sea of faces, some still skeptical, some cautiously hopeful, some already committed. We were all cast out in some way, rejected by systems that valued power over justice, and now we're proving those systems wrong. We're proving that there's another way. So stand with me. Help me build this. Not because I'm some perfect leader, I'm not. I make mistakes. I doubt myself constantly. But because together, we can create something worth fighting for. Something worth dying for if necessary. But more importantly, something worth living for. The silence that followed was absolute. Then one wolf stood. Then another. Then 10, 20, 50. Within seconds, the entire assembly was on their feet, not in deference, but in solidarity. And in that moment, standing before hundreds of wolves who'd chosen to believe in something better, holding her son against her chest, Lyra finally understood what her mother had died for. Not just truth, hope. The days that followed were a whirlwind of organization, delegation, and constant negotiation. But slowly, the Confederation found its rhythm. Laws were established. Trade routes opened. Disputes were resolved through council meetings instead of violence. It wasn't paradise. There were still arguments, still challenges, still wolves who couldn't let go of the old ways. But it was better. Undeniably, measurably better. 3 months after the Confederation's founding, Lyra stood in the healer's den with Mira, watching Kyle take his first wobbly steps. He's early, Mira observed. Most pups don't walk until closer to a year. He's impatient, like his mother. Lyra caught him as he stumbled, laughing at his frustrated growl. Everything's a challenge to him. Gonna be an interesting teenager. Don't remind me. Lyra set him down again, watching as he determinedly pulled himself up and tried again. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Draven hadn't found me that night? In the Wither Reach? You'd be dead. Kyle would be dead. None of this would exist. Mira was matter-of-fact about it. But he did find you, and you survived, and here we are. Here we are, Lyra echoed. Sarah burst into the den, breathless. Alpha, you need to come see this. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just come. Lyra scooped up Kyle and followed Sarah to the main gates. What she saw there made her stop dead. A line of wolves stretched from the gates toward the horizon. Hundreds of them, maybe more. They've been arriving all morning, Sarah said. More exiles. More outcasts. Word spread to the far territories. They're coming to join us. How many? We've counted over 300 so far, and they're still coming. Lyra stared at the line, feeling something between awe and terror. We don't have resources for that many. Then we'll find them, build more shelters, expand the hunting grounds, figure it out. Sarah grinned. That's what we do, right? Figure it out? Yeah. Lyra took a breath. Yeah, that's what we do. She walked to the gates and stood before the gathered wolves. They looked at her with expressions ranging from hope to desperation to simple exhaustion. Welcome, she said, her voice carrying. Welcome to the Alliance. We have work to do, but we'll do it together. No one gets turned away. Not anymore. A ragged cheer went up. That evening, Lyra stood once more on the wall overlooking the territory. But this time, instead of seeing a compound, she saw a community. Wolves from dozens of different backgrounds working together, building together, living together. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was hers, theirs. Something they'd all created together from the ashes of broken systems. Draven joined her, as he often did. "You're thinking too much again." "Just reflecting." She adjusted Kyle, who was awake and babbling at the stars. "A year ago, I was being rejected in front of my entire pack, marked for death, completely alone. And now you're the leader of the largest alliance in the territories, mother to a healthy son, builder of a new society." He paused. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying, overwhelming, impossible," she smiled. "But also right. Like this is what I was always supposed to do. Like every horrible thing that happened led me here." "Maybe it did. Maybe." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for standing with me, for believing this could work. You did the hard part. I just provided backup." He looked at her seriously. "You know this isn't over, right? There will be more challenges, more wolves who want to tear down what we've built." "I know. And you're ready for them?" Lyra looked down at Kyle, at his innocent face and bright eyes. Then out at the territory, at the compound full of wolves who'd found hope when they'd had none, who'd been given a chance when everyone else had written them off. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm ready." Because she wasn't the outcast healer anymore, wasn't the exile running for her life, wasn't the pregnant wolf abandoned by her pack. She was Alpha Lyra Vance of the Alliance Confederation, mother, leader, builder of a new world. And she was just getting started. Years later, when wolves told the story of how the Alliance began, they would talk about the outcast who became a queen, the exile who united the packs, the woman who took rejection and transformed it into revolution. But the story was simpler than that. It was about a wolf who refused to die, who chose survival over surrender, who took everything meant to destroy her and used it to build something better. It was about a mother protecting her son in a world that wanted him dead. It was about justice finally meaning something real, and it was about hope, fragile, impossible, stubborn hope, proving stronger than fear. In the end, that was all it took to change the world. One rejected wolf who refused to stay down. One woman who chose to fight when everyone said she should submit. One mother who looked at her son and decided he deserved better than the world she'd inherited. That was how kingdoms fell, and how new ones rose from their ashes.